у серці, як дизель в двигунах, важкий кевларний гір, він душу опікає, в атаку сухопутні ідуть війська. Піхота йде, вони безстрашні, піхота рве, ворожу пащу вимає йти, міцніше сталі віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний гір, несуть армади, війська землі, міцніше сталі за нами мир і честь держави.
Пройду неухильно тяжкий шлях войны мерзотной и кривавой на наших володных пляжах. Устыми мстях шляхетной славы я Калиновский наш кастусь. Мне приклад так и лёс Литвина, я вызволяю Беларусь. Праз вызволение Украины як тур клянуся оборонить. У пекле битвы побратима. Вечно будешь жить у памяти моей родимы. Обовязково повернусь, коли у битвах не загину. Уродный край у Беларусь, праз вызволение Украины. Уродный край у Беларусь, праз вызволение Украины.
На коліно своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання воно вібрало у собі. Воно зібрало у собі. Відвагу нашу нашій волі, загиблих друзів імена. Читаю нашого вімолі, я полкового знамена. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the stream. It is now day 163, and it's good to see everybody once again.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, which we've had incredible news today with a Russian ship being hit somewhere in the Black Sea. We did report on the fire that was spotted out offshore yesterday, but we have some follow-up pictures today that were provided by Pravda News that do confirm that a Russian stealth corvette was damaged in the Black Sea yesterday and limped into Sevastopol port today. Before we get to the Ukraine war news tonight, y'all may see that in the title, we do have a special little segment to cover tonight from Israel. We have a couple of viewers from Israel, and I think that this news is very pertinent to cover, and it also pertains to Ukraine in a way. And so before I actually head into that special news segment, let's go over tonight's schedule so that way everyone knows what's in store for all of y'all. Starting off, we will be beginning in Israel and covering the events that occurred in the Gaza Strip just over last night. After we cover these bits of news, we're then going to be moving up to immediately cover the next major piece of news today that occurred in Sevastopol port with a stealth corvette that was apparently hit by Ukrainian fire. We'll then be covering that news and moving up into the southern front as well and covering all the news there. After we cover all of this, we'll then be moving into, I guess you could call it international news, including the news from the United Kingdom, Belarus, and also Russian state TV. But before we get to all of that news, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move into the international news segment and also our location unknowns and the Kharkiv segment as well. That will all be one large clump. After we cover all of that news, we will then be finally moving on to our last segment of news, and of course we'll take a pause to answer 3 questions from the chat before we get to the last segment, and then we will move on down into the northern Donbass, also the almost non-existent news that we've gotten from the Donetsk area today. And finally, we will wrap up with the Southern Front news and the speech from President Zelensky, which will round out tonight's stream, and then we'll be moving into the question segment and answering as many questions as possible. Of course, all of the questions that were sent in via Super Chat, and as many live chats as we can. Now, one thing I have noticed over the past few nights is that we have gotten so efficient with getting to everyone's questions that we're running out of live chat questions sometimes. And so, if you do have a question, please make sure to @Enforcer or @EnforcerMatt, so that way Matthew can gather up all the questions that everyone has, so that way we have a load of them to work off of. We would like to have a massive pool because, one, that allows us to sometimes answer questions that have never been answered before, or at least look into what the answer may be for those. And so having a large question pool can help us out a great deal. So make sure to do that if you would like to have a question answered. You do not have to put in a super chat to get a question answered. You can simply just throw one in the live chat, and usually a decent amount of them are answered at the end of the stream. But without further ado, it is now time to get to some of the large news that we've gotten today from around the world outside of Ukraine, which shows a very interesting event occurring near the Gaza Strip. Now, not to get into the political situation here in Israel, but just to explain to some people who may, just to say that's been living under a rock, because if you don't know about what's been going on in Israel for about the past 70 years, then I don't know where you've been. But the nation of Israel has a little bit of, I guess you could say, a schism within it. That's almost always constantly occurring in between them and the Palestinians. Usually this boils over every once in a while in terrorist attacks, usually perpetrated by the Palestinians, or some kind of firefight perpetrated by the Israeli Defense Force within Palestine, and then that boils over into something of a quasi-conflict that will last for several weeks or months. It usually boils over every once in a while, and it appears that over last night, some kind of an attack did begin to coalesce, where we could see an MLRS, or something similar to it, being fired from the Gaza Strip. Here's a video of those rockets taking flight and traveling into Israeli airspace. Here's the video. As we all know, this does not look exactly like a grad. The spread of these rockets was incredibly wide, and so I'm assuming that the system used to launch the rockets was crude, but still, the effects of the Iron Dome system cannot be questioned by any degree. The Iron Dome did its job and then some. So here's some footage of those missiles being intercepted by the Iron Dome. And I've got to say, this is an impressive video, and this will tie into Ukraine here in a second. So if you're wondering why this international segment of news was included, because stuff like this does happen in Israel somewhat regularly. It's a little uncommon, but still it's regular enough to not make headline news. Here's a video of Iron Dome systems intercepting these rockets that were fired into Israel. We can see 2 Iron Dome missiles flying out to the distance to intercept some of these rockets that have been fired into Israel. We can now see them slamming into the rockets, destroying them before they can even hit the ground. Now the video repeats. But we're now going to move on to the next one, because I think this next one really summarizes how effective the Iron Dome system is. We have an entire story to cover here from start to finish of that MLRS barrage all the way to the Israeli response at the very end. But we're going to take a quick pause after this video to explain why the Iron Dome is something to be focused on and its abilities. So here's the video that shows the Iron Dome firing off nearly as many rockets that were fired in response to shoot them down. And so here's the video. We see one of the Iron Dome missiles flying over Israel and getting ready to shoot down the rockets that have been fired. We can actually see something very interesting here. I want to point this out clearly. When you see the missile take a very, I guess you could say, high angle of climb, it then dips back down, starts going lower towards the ground, and then immediately lifts back up in altitude here in a second to come under the rocket, slam into it, and destroy it. An impressive display. And seeing the technological ability of these Iron Dome systems, one has to ask, why hasn't Israel given one of these to the Ukrainians yet? We did know that the Israelis spoke about that a while ago, but we've never actually seen them send one. And seeing its technological abilities clearly on video in the present day, and especially since the attack occurred at night, and so you could clearly see where the missiles were due to, I guess you could say, the flare of the rockets in the rocket's motor, and also the MLRS rockets in flight. It gives you a very clear depiction of how effective the Iron Dome system is, as well as the missiles they fire. And so moving back to Ukraine, if the Ukrainians had a couple of these, like say in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, and Slovyansk, just as a couple of examples, imagine the amount of civilian casualties that could be curtailed if the Israelis actually gave them a system like that. The proof is in the pudding. We literally just saw actual videos that occurred over the past 24 hours of the effectiveness of an Iron Dome and how it's easily able to shoot down multiple rockets, much like the Grads that are firing into Kharkiv right now, and an Iron Dome could easily handle those rockets and maybe even larger ones like ballistic and cruise missiles, although I really haven't seen the Iron Dome system face down against one of those. Still, it's something that I think should be looked into, and if the Israelis are not necessarily happy with giving permission for the Iron Dome to be sold or sent to Ukraine, maybe another country out there, wink wink nudge nudge, the United States, needs to pressure the Israelis a little bit to relinquish a couple of these systems to the Ukrainians, so that way they can defend their major cities far better than they are right now. Now, to wrap up this story in Israel, a lot of y'all may know it's almost a given rule whenever anything happens in between Palestine and Israel. If the Palestinians or the Israelis do anything against the other responds in kind nearly immediately. It's a tit-for-tat situation. And the Israeli Defense Force did destroy a munitions dump that they were able to find, and I guess was associated with these attacks, and we can see that here on film. We can see here the explosion of this supposed dump, which is in retaliation for the MLRS, the attempted MLRS strike on Israeli territory. A very interesting little story that occurred there, and we will be following that one if anything begins to develop and become something of a steady rate down there. If I guess you could say, because back in the day, back when I remember this being a big deal, and of course mentioned a lot in the United States, back then it was Hezbollah that was operating out of the Gaza Strip. If a organization like Hezbollah, a Hezbollah-esque organization, begins to commit attacks against the Israelis commonly, and the Israelis are constantly responding, we will start to cover that story in more detail if we get more news on it. But for now, that's the only story we have. It looks like it's a one-off event right now, but it does show the effectiveness of the Iron Dome system, and also gives a really good case as to why it should be sent to Ukraine, so that way they can defend their own country. Now, I saw someone say something interesting in the chat, which they said that the Iron Dome system is American-made. So let's pull this up real quick. It's a CRAM and short-range air defense system. Its place of origin is Israel. And so the United States has not designed, developed, or produces the Iron Dome systems. These are entirely an Israeli creation. And I have to say, they're actually fairly impressive. Like we saw on film, their capabilities are nearly unmatched, and that's why it is, I guess you could say, the go-to missile defense system anywhere around the world. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of Israel, and we're now going to be moving to our next large bit of news, and I have to say, this next bit of news is really impressive. A lot of y'all may remember the rumors that the Vasily Baikov had been sunk in the Black Sea many months ago, and it met the Moskva in its special underwater operation. We found out about a week later that apparently the Vasily Baikov was not sunk, or it was heavily damaged and then was replaced by another stealth corvette out there on patrol. However, just to recap on what we saw yesterday so the story comes together, we saw a Russian ship burning off the coast of Ukraine yesterday, and it looks like a Ukrainian crew with a DJI Mavic was filming the fire from their rib. And so real quick, let me show y'all this video so that way we can recap. There's the large fire plume coming from a ship in the distance. We see the Ukrainians showing off the drone footage and also showing the fire in the distance. Today, we were able to get confirmation that a stealth corvette of the Black Sea Fleet limped into Sevastopol port today and had visible fire damage on the side of it. Let's see that picture real quick just so that way I can show it. Now, this is the exact same class of ship as the Vasily Baikov. You can actually see the fire damage here on the backside of the stern. The entire ship is painted in the somewhat light gray color, and this black, dark, I guess you could say carbon-like substance definitely shows that a large fire was ravaging the back of the stealth corvette, but was apparently brought under control enough, and even with the damage that was inflicted on the ship, it was able to limp back into port at Sevastopol for repairs, which may take a while depending on the damage. Now, we read through the rest of this article, because considering that it is backed up by picture evidence, I'm going to waive our usual don't trust any other news rather than what we're able to research on our own, considering that they actually have proof to back up their story. So we see here, in the morning of August 5th, a partly burned ship belonging to the Black Sea Fleet entered a bay and occupied Sevastopol. Radio Svoboda's Isreali project and H.I. Sutton, naval expert on Twitter. Details. According to Radio Svoboda, reporter in the Crimea, at approximately 9:15, a Project 22160 patrol ship, the same as the Vasily Baikov, belonging to Russia's Black Sea Fleet, entered Sevastopol Bay. Its starboard side was burned in the stern area, as we saw in the picture. A Green Army rocket launcher was also noticed on its stern. I don't really know what relevance that has, and we really can't tell from these pictures what kind of system that is. With the assistance of towboats, it docked off Kurinaya Wharf at 9:30. Let's see if we can actually find that. Kurinaya Wharf. So here's the port. Kurinaya Wharf. I'm sure it's going to have military ships at it. It's probably been a military dock for some while. We can see some submarines here. We can actually see a Kilo-class sub, the captured Ukrainian sub. Well, no, that may be the captured Ukrainian sub, or either of them could be. They're both incredibly old. Let's see, we're looking for Kurinaya Wharf. We can see some of the Russian frigates here, and also some of the Russian support ships, like the ship that was sunk at Berdyansk Harbor. But I'm having a tough time finding Kurinaya Port. Oh, let's see here. Kurinaya Wharf. We're looking for Kurinaya Wharf. And I don't see it, unfortunately. And due to time constraints, I'm not going to try and look for it, because that may just be a wild goose chase. It may not be labeled on, say, Google Maps. but it is somewhere in the Sevastopol harbor area. And you can see it's actually a pretty sizable harbor. It just stretches literally the entire length of the inlet. Anyways, moving back to the actual news article, we can also see another picture of this Vasily Baikov class ship. We're not going to call it the Project 22160 because that's just convoluted. We're going to call it a Baikov class. And we can see it here once again moving through the Sevastopol inlet, and we can see a tugboat traveling a little behind it. Once again, we can see the burn damage clearly on the stern. On August 4th, H.I. Sutton at Naval Export reported that a Russian ship near occupied Sevastopol had begun to release a smokescreen and was then enveloped in dark smoke, suggestive of a fire. In Sutton's opinion, the Russians were trying to camouflage the ship, but it was nevertheless hit by a Ukrainian missile. Maybe a Neptune anti-ship missile or a Harpoon anti-ship missile. We're not entirely sure, which was why it was wrapped in smoke. Well, I don't like to take strikes against people, but I think we could largely assume that based off of the video evidence ourselves. But anyways, moving on from that, we can see that one of Russia's newest and most advanced stealth corvettes has been hit and is damaged and is limped back into port. Considering that the damage based off of the fire we saw the other day may have been significant to the stern of the ship, we may see this ship out of action for several months, which, as far as this war is concerned, may be another ship that's been knocked entirely off the roster. Now let's look at the Black Sea Fleet, and let's see what kind of ships they have left, to say the least. So scrolling down, we see a lot of the ships of the Black Sea Fleet here, still based in Sevastopol port in 2007. They've always been based there. Back before the Maidanhead riots of 2014, the Ukrainians actually granted the Russians port access for the Black Sea Fleet at Sevastopol, and that had been their permanent basing point. So let's see here. We want to find the ships. All right, so we know that all of the Admiral Grigorovich class frigates, I believe, are still intact. The Kriviks, I believe, are still intact as well. Is this an updated roster? Because I don't see the Moskva on it. I actually think this is an updated roster that's already knocked off all of the previous ships that were on it that have been confirmed to have been destroyed. Because if we notice here in their surface ship division, they don't have any Moskva class cruisers in it. So they've already knocked off all of the surface ships that have been hit. Let's see here. We can see the Kilo classes, we can see the Alligators, we can see the high-speed ships, and so on. We can see some of the smaller coastal defense ships here. So it looks like they've already knocked them off the roster. So sadly, based off of the Wikipedia news we're able to get, I can't actually tell you how many ships they've lost because they've already knocked all of those off the roster. So with that, we're now going to be moving on. Let's see if they have... They don't even have the Project 22160s on here. It seems... No, they have them here. So... Alright, let's look through this again. Maybe they still have the Moskva on here. No? They don't. Okay, so let's go up here to the 22160s. We can see that they have 4 of them. Here in the Black Sea Fleet. We can actually see that one of them was commissioned in May, pretty much in the middle of the war. The Sergei Kotov, which is exactly the same class as the other 4. We can also see that, let's see, returned to the Black Sea from the Mediterranean in February 2022. So all of them are in the Black Sea right now. And apparently the... Let's see here, what was the exact name of this one? It doesn't look like they actually give the name. They say it's a Project 22160, but they don't tell us which one it is. So it could be the Vasily Baikov, it could be the Dmitry Rogachev, it could be the Pavel Derzhavin, or it could be the Sergei Kotov. We're not exactly sure, but it is one of those 4, and it's most likely been knocked out for the rest of the war, which is incredibly impressive, I have to say. And it's another, I guess you could say, knockdown for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. They continue to lose ships out of the actual theater as the months go by, and another pretty impressive one. We don't even know how much these things cost to build. And considering they're brand new, I'm going to assume that they cost a decent bit. So let's see if we can find an actual cost for this thing. Oh man, you know, the one thing that no one likes to talk about is how much does it cost to build these things. Project 22160 cost. 180 million. And so a $180 million dollar Corvette has just been knocked out for probably several months. Pretty impressive at that, and I gotta say, quite an achievement by the Ukrainian armed forces. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Crimea and up into the Kherson front, where we haven't gotten a lot of news today, but one of the videos is suggesting that major troop movements are occurring on the Ukrainian side. Of course, we don't know the exact location of where this occurred in the Kherson area, but it was mentioned to have happened down there. And so here's the video of a massive Ukrainian tank column moving its way towards the front. Here's the video. We can see that it looks like the entire unit is made up of T-72s, I believe. And it is a massive column. We haven't seen anything like this since the beginning of the war, when Russian armored columns began to flow over the border and racing towards Ukrainian cities. Now see the tanks continuing to move along right by a sunflower field. It lets us know that the Russians apparently had a major battle there and lost. And that's the end of the video. It's impressive to see this many tanks on the move by the Ukrainians. We haven't seen massive armored action by any means from the Ukrainians over the entirety of this war, and seeing this many Ukrainian tanks in a single spot is something that definitely needs to be taken note of, because it may be suggesting that the Ukrainians are preparing for some kind of large defensive in the area or some kind of large counterattack. We're not entirely sure right now, but we will keep an eye and see if we find those tanks anywhere else on the front lines later on. Moving on down towards the Kherson front itself, we have seen a little video put out about a Ukrainian woman sniper that's apparently been given the call sign Witch. And so without further ado, here's the video, and here's her explaining her story. Also, there's a text-to-speech translation here at the bottom of the screen.
Її позивний так охрестили побратими за особливу вдачу. Дівчина-снайпер в прикордонному загоні. Боронить південні рубежі України, а ще зовсім недавно була вчителькою історії. Та всередині в неї завжди жив боєць. Дівчина мала хобі – спортивну стрільбу. Тож 24 лютого захоплення вмить перетворилося на головну справу.
Із наших спортсменів служать більшість. Дехто займається волонтерською діяльністю, але осторонь не лишився ніхто. Тому все, що було на сейфах, тому що озброєння і все, що необхідне, у нас було своє. Ми зібралися і прийшли.
Снайпери працюють у двійках. Відьма в парі з Тихим. Та саме вона – перший номер. Зараз якраз відпрацьовують взаємодію на відкритій місцевості.
На уровне всего подразделения она работает. Выход, значит, выход, полная экипировка, значит, полная экипировка, дистанции те же. Живем в одних и тех же условиях. Все это она переносит спокойно. Во всяком случае, вида не показывает.
Коли дівчина у нас з'явилася в колективі, це одразу стало позитивно. Ми раді бачити, коли дівчина служить в Збройних сил України, Державної прикордонної служби України, і це підіймає бойовий дух.
Педагогічний досвід та спортивні навички знадобилися дівчині в її новій роботі. Вона тренує своїх побратимів, навчає азам тактичної стрільби та медичної допомоги. Впевнена, завдяки таким захисникам живими загарбникам з України не вибратися.
Що може вбити людину? Забрати життя важко, але коли стає загроза твоєму життю чи життю твоїх рідних, коли в твою країну, в твій дім входить ворог, то, я думаю, кожен з нас готовий на це. Захищати себе, свою державу і сім'ю.
Чи пов'яже в майбутньому свою долю з армією, чи повернеться до вчителювання, відьма поки не думає. Каже, головне для неї зараз перемога. Хоче в спільну для країни мрію зробити свій посильний вклад. А всі інші життєві цілі ставитиме та досягатиме вже після того, як ворога буде знищено.
And that's the end of the video. And one thing I would like to say, because I don't know a lot about exact kinds of rifles and the different variants of each, but I do have to say that someone pointed this one out in the chat, and I was thinking this. That was a Remington 700. Definitely not a military rifle by any means. If you consider a rifle a military rifle or not, all of them could be used. But still, what she's using is the commonly made and produced Remington 700. This is what a lot of hunters here in the United States use, and I have seen a lot of them back when I used to live in the country in Alabama. So this is something that's really cool to me because she's not using a military-issued sniper rifle. She's using the one that she apparently used in sports shooting. So pretty cool, I have to say. Also, I like the suppressor on it. That was a really nice little addition, especially for a Remington 700. And I wish her the best of luck, because if I know anything, a lot of people would swear by the Remington 700 and say it was actually a pretty good gun. You can get these in all kinds of calibers. You can get really any kind of stock you want. It doesn't have to be wooden. You can really get these things kitted out. That's still a Remington 700, surprisingly, under all of this additional stuff that's been put on top of it. But still, congratulations to the witch for being a member of the Ukrainian military and being prized for her hobby of target shooting before the war. That's a great skill to have once a war begins, and something that I know that a load of Americans have, because that's something that I used to kind of do often, but kind of fell out of fashion with because it got so expensive. But to talk for a moment about something that would absolutely flip me out if I saw it on the front lines, and this is just an aside of my own, so please allow me to talk about something that would be completely impractical, but I've always had a fascination with the Sharps 4570 rifle. Now, a lot of people always say Quigley Down Under, but I've never really seen Quigley Down Under until after I got into the Sharps rifle, and then I watched the movie, and honestly, it was okay, but I still just like the Sharps rifle. This thing shoots a 4570 round, and a lot of people here in the United States that are in the professional marksmanship realm, at least in the Midwest from what I know, shoot a lot of these. And these are like one of the cat's meow kind of, I guess you could say, precision guns that you can get. Now, that is not to say that the 4570 is the best round you can fire. That thing has an arc on it like a rainbow. You have to fire that thing straight up into the air to actually hit something about 1.5 miles away. But still, it's an incredibly interesting rifle. And if I saw one of those in Ukraine, I don't know if I would be concerned or ecstatic, but still, it's very interesting to see that civilian rifles, at least what people would consider to be civilian rifles, are being used on the front lines by Ukrainian soldiers, and especially the sniper. But with that, we don't have any exact news as to what's happening in the Kherson front still. While we did see that massive tank movement, we haven't gotten any news of the front line moving in any direction right now, and so we will be paying attention to see if anything does happen, where we can see that the Ukrainians are either conducting a large counterattack, or if the Russians are conducting an offensive trying to push out of the area. We're not really sure which is happening anymore. It seems like a counterattack, if it did happen, has completely stalled or fallen apart, because there's no news coming out anymore of anything like that. To be honest, I have to say this because this is something I have been thinking, is that due to the media blackout, a counterattack may have happened by the Ukrainians, begun to stall, and then they just stopped it and haven't really said much about it since. Because I was thinking about everything that we've seen so far, and President Zelensky did make a comment several days ago, well, actually about a couple of weeks ago, when we thought that the Ukrainian counterattack had begun in the Kherson area, and he said that the Ukrainians were going to be making slow and meaningful progress over the next few days in the Kherson area. Yeah, we didn't really see that happen, but we did have a lot of evidence of a textbook counterattack most likely trying to occur due to all 3 bridge crossings being destroyed in the Kherson area, which cut off the Russians from supplies, and also a route of retreat, in a way, until the pontoon bridge was set up. And so I'm not really sure if a counterattack happened and failed here, but the evidence and what we're kind of hearing may have suggested that that did happen, and we're not really getting the entire story as to what happened down there. But we'll be looking into that. That may just be an assumption on my part that's wrong, but that's something that I have been considering based off of all of the information we had showing that a counterattack was most likely occurring in the area. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the Mykolaiv region, where we have seen that the Russians have unfortunately struck another house and destroyed it. We don't know if any Ukrainian civilians were killed or wounded. Hopefully they were not. But here's the video showing the damage that's been caused by the Russians just over last night.
Ранковий обстріл Корабельного району. Зараз ми знову перебуваємо під обстрілом. Скоріше за все використовуються урагани або смерчі. Влучило в один з приватних будинків. Наразі бачимо, які пошкодження.
With that, that's the end of the video, and of course, an unfortunate sight to see. We don't know if any civilians were wounded or killed, and considering it was a house, there may have been civilians inside of it. And it's always a sickening thing to think that these attacks continue. And also to talk about something that's been occurring in the background, but I haven't really covered. I've heard that a group, I believe, I don't really know a lot about them, but it's apparently called Amnesty International, has made a statement saying that the Ukrainians are war criminals, and actually pointing out around 50 Ukrainian military officers and commanders as war criminals. Now, that's really interesting to me because they have not made a statement like that about, say, the Russians during this entire war, even when we've seen confirmed evidence of war crimes like in the Bucha Hospital Irpin area, or, for example, in the town of Borodyanka. We haven't heard anything like that, but they're now going to make that claim against the Ukrainians, and it apparently seems from the story I've been getting that they didn't even consult with their Amnesty Ukraine office about this statement, and in fact, a lot of people that are associated with the Amnesty Ukraine group are stepping down from their positions and leaving the organization because of it. I'm not really sure what's happening there. We'll try and keep apprised of that situation. But with that, we've now covered all of the news in the Kherson and Mykolaiv area, and we're now going to be moving out into the international news, starting off with London and then making our way to Russian state TV. So with that, starting off, we've heard that apparently Cambridge University is going to be taking on Ukrainians to teach them medical aid and medical treatment. It's an incredibly interesting thing. They'll be teaching the medical students at Cambridge University, and from what I'm guessing, apparently it's free of charge, which is a pretty good deal for these Ukrainians. Cambridge and Oxford are considered some of the top universities in the world, and so getting to one of them at all is really impressive. And it's good to know that the British are definitely a friend of the Ukrainians and are doing everything they can, every single way possible, to help out the Ukrainians in this war and help them to eventually win it. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next news from Belarus, where we can actually see an unlikely friend, apparently, in the Belarusian public. A concert was run today by a Belarusian singer, and a lot of people in the crowd seemed to support her song, which was actually a pro-Ukrainian song. So with that, here's the video, and apparently, based off of the caption, she was apparently arrested shortly after this song was sung. So with that, here's the video of her singing a pro-Ukrainian song in the middle of Minsk. With that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that although the Belarusian government is completely batty in what they do, sometimes condemning the Ukrainians, sometimes praising them, it appears that the Ukrainians do have a friend in the Belarusian people, and that would be something that if we looked into politically, at least within the internal politics of Belarus, has been something that's been going on for a while as a sort of anti-Lukashenko, anti-dictatorship movement in Belarus, and that's also led to a lot of Belarusians to pretty much be exiled from their home country, and that's why there's a large Belarusian contingent fighting for the Ukrainians in the current war. Hopefully, something can be done in the future to remove Lukashenko from power, because it seems that his rule, also the Russians' thumb on Belarus, has become something that the Belarusian public no longer wants to bear, because I didn't see a single person booing the singer in this crowd. In fact, a lot of them were holding out their phones with their lights on in support. With that, everyone, prepare yourselves, put on your hats. We're now about to be moving into Russia. And when I say hats, I mean tinfoil hats, because this is about to get pretty bad. We've gotten 2 videos from Russian state TV today, and both of them are not good. We're going to start off with the first one, just showing y'all what they're talking about with the North Koreans. There's a speech-to-text translation at the bottom, so I'm going to let it play in its entirety, and then we'll go back and talk about it a little bit. So, here's the video.
Теперь дальше по Донбассу. Вот появилась информация, что 100 тысяч северокорейских добровольцев готовы прибыть для участия в боевых действиях против...
Северокорейские добровольцы, Игорь Юрьевич, даже звучит как Оксимирон.
Знаете, может быть шутка, может быть нет, не знаю, но Северная Корея, по крайней мере, политически свою позицию обозначила. Более того, северокорейские строители готовы работать вместе с нашими по восстановлению разрушенных Украиной городов Донбасса, Херсонской, Запорожской и других областей, которые мы освобождаем и которые еще предстоит освободить. Но почему мы должны стесняться, например, взять и воспользоваться такой помощью?
Не должны.
Кстати говоря, северокорейские строители работают качественно, хорошо, выносливы, неприхотливы, самое главное, мотивированы. И не надо нам стесняться принимать вот эту руку, которую нам протягивает Ким Чен Ын. Да вообще России пора выйти из режима санкций против Северной Кореи. Открыть границу, наладить нормальный товарообмен. Ну а если северокорейские добровольцы с их артиллерийскими системами, богатым опытом контрбатарейной борьбы, с реактивными системами залпового огня северокорейского производства, повышенного калибра, захотят принять участие в боевых действиях, ну, давайте зажгем зеленый свет на пути их к добровольческому порыву. В конце концов, мы помогали Северной Корее. Если Северная Корея вдруг изъявит такое желание выполнить свой интернациональный долг по борьбе с украинским фашизмом, давайте окажем ей
Мы не просто помогали, мы ее создали.
Ну, в данном случае мы здесь в определенной степени говорим с уважением. Да, в истоке независимости Северной Кореи советская и китайская военная помощь, и наши добровольцы. И если сегодня северокорейские трудовые и военные добровольцы прибудут на Донбасс, это суверенное право суверенных государств ДНР и ЛНР заключить соответствующие межправительственные соглашения.
What in the world is this guy talking about? That's something that I've been trying to find out ever since I watched this video before the stream began. Is what in the world does he think North Korea is? Some kind of a free country? Like, you know, like there's just 100,000 North Korean volunteers, and they don't need the approval of the central government. You know, pretty much Kim Jong-un to be able to do anything like this. They're just willing to go. This sounds a lot like the whole entire myth of the Syrian volunteers that were supposed to arrive in Ukraine and, of course, turn the tide for the Russians because they're just so good at fighting. They've been doing it for 12 years. But we never saw them arrive. And it seems like this is kind of falling under that same criteria because if the North Koreans actually had, quote-unquote, 100,000 volunteers to send, doesn't anyone think that they would just, you know, send them? You know, that's what I would think. If you had volunteers in that kind of numbers, why not just send them? Why in the world is this something that's kind of like on the table as a point of discussion? Like they're saying, you know, that's something that a lot of people say they're saying, I'm hearing, but that doesn't mean anything. And also, if the North Koreans seriously meant that, we would probably have heard or seen that on North Korean state television, which we always get common glimpses of and looks of outside of North Korea itself. So I don't really know what the guy is talking about there, but let's rewind and let's break down some of what this guy said in every single little segment. Also, we can see one of the Russians here. I forgot to mention this. He did make fun of the guy. He was like, North Korean volunteers, that's an oxymoron.
Звучит как оксимирон.
Знаете, может быть шутка, может быть нет, не знаю, но...
And then this guy even goes and sits here and elaborates 2 minutes after, and he sits there and says, yeah, it may be a joke, but still, let's seriously consider it. And another thing, if the war is going so good for the Russians, why in the world are they calling on the North Koreans, who literally still wear uniforms from the 1950s, to help them out? Has anyone seen what a North Korean combat soldier dresses like? Because let me show you, these guys are not the ones you want helping you in a war. Let me pull up some images here. We're not going to look at the dress uniforms. We're going to look at what they actually use in combat. Well, at least on the DMZ. That is what they use. This is the exact same uniform they use at the DMZ. You know the last time a country actually used uniforms and gear like this? Wait a minute, let me find y'all a better resolution picture. This illustration will do well enough. These are Soviet Army uniforms, and based off of the caption, I'm assuming these are from 1948. Well, no, these look much later than that. That's a VDV uniform from what looks like the 80s or the 70s. So let me try and find a better one. 1 second, everyone. I got to try and find one. Okay, so this is a propaganda poster from the 60s. The 60s. The North Korean army in the 2020s. Do you really think these people would actually be a competent fighting force by any means? I want to know what y'all think in the chat about that, because my answer is no. I don't really think you have to have a lot of sense to say that the North Koreans are a massive joke militarily. They have the numbers, but as we see, just because you have 1 million soldiers on a spreadsheet doesn't mean anything when it comes down to training, competence, and ability. And that's certainly something that you can see with the North Koreans, especially when they're still using trucks from the 60s. I mean, like, literally their entire military is vintage. And if we look through it enough, the whole thing is like this. These look like T-62Ms. Antiques. We're making fun of these exact tanks being used in the Ukraine war. Yet we act like you know, the Western world does, that North Korea is some kind of a major threat. And on top of that, the Russian guy here is trying to act like they're seriously a force to be reckoned with, and they're really going to help turn around this war. What a joke. Now we can see right here that in the most recent military parade, they did get a uniform upgrade. At least some of their units did. I'm sure that this is not reflective of the entire North Korean military, but they did get some more modern uniforms. And we also saw them show off a brand new tank, which I'm kind of putting in the same criteria as the T-14 Armada, because the North Koreans definitely do not have the economic or industrial ability to actually make those. So I'm kind of just throwing them out there as, you know, not really existent. But still, let's move on and listen to what the rest of this guy has to say and break it down a little bit more.
Корея, по крайней мере, политически свою позицию обозначила. Более того, северокорейские строители готовы работать вместе с нашими по восстановлению разрушенных.
And I love how this guy says the cities Ukraine has destroyed. Although we've seen videos month after month of the Russians leveling these cities with their own artillery barrages. I mean, like, it literally shows it's for itself. But here this guy goes, spinning the story whichever way he wants, and the Ukrainians are the one that has destroyed the Donbass.
Украины, городов Донбасса, Херсонской, Запорожской и других областей, которые мы освобождаем и которые еще предстоит освободить. Ну почему мы должны стесняться, например, взять и воспользоваться такой помощью?
Why should we be shy about accepting and making use of that help? I don't know. Maybe because you're saying that you're doing so good in the war. I mean, like, you pretty much just said that a minute ago. We've liberated these cities, and they stay liberated thanks to the brave power and might of the Russian military. If you're doing that well, then why in the world are you having to draw on a third world country for support? I mean, like, God, I'm like, it's a joke to actually think that these people would do anything serious. It really is. There's, like, and I don't understand that kind of getting in a little bit of a rant about North Korea. I don't know why the United States, beyond North Korea's nuclear ability, acts like they are a serious force to be contended with. Because if they actually try to make the Korean War hot again with South Korea, the South Koreans will literally cut these people up like mincemeat. There's no other way to go about that. So we're going to let the video continue a little bit more.
Кстати говоря, северокорейские строители работают качественно, хорошо.
North Korean builders work efficiently and well. Based off of what? Where in the world have we seen North Korean builders? Now, there's North Korean laborers that work in the middle of Siberia in North Korean labor camps that the Russians allow. But those are laborers cutting down trees and making bricks. How in the world does that equate to being good builders? Where in the world in North Korea does it look like they built anything good? North Korea. Let me give y'all an example from the middle of Propaganda Village, which is Pyongyang. And I know there's an actual propaganda village on the border, but for our reasons, Pyongyang is that village today. This is probably the only place we'll get Google Earth 360 pictures or pictures of any kind. So let's go here to Street View. Oh, look at that. There's like a couple of pictures of Pyongyang. So let's go here. And let's go to a populated area. Workers' Party found neat. We're going to go close to the Workers' Party headquarters, which is probably close to the palace. Now, this area is built up massively. This thing was probably built, I would assume, in the 70s or the 80s, most likely, when North Korea was kind of going through its renaissance, especially compared to South Korea. But what in the world does this give as indication that they're good builders? Let me go to another part of town. Let me try and get near the pyramid. Where in the world is the pyramid? There it is. The Ryunggang. Let's see if we can find a picture of that. No picture. Are you kidding me? This thing here. is about the most largest and impressive thing that the North Koreans have ever been able to construct. And it's empty. They couldn't even complete it. And now someone was able to wander around in there a couple of years ago. It looks like nothing was done inside of it, plumbing-wise or anything, and it may have been built as a literal propaganda stunt, just to make North Korea look advanced. And look at all the buildings around it. These things had to have been built in the 70s. And everyone's sitting here acting, well, not everyone, this Russian's acting like they're good builders. Since when? Since when? This is... Anyways, we're going to let it continue. I'm not going to keep on going down that rabbit hole. Undemanding, because if they demand anything, they're going to be executed by political commissars or put in political camps. They're he said, most importantly, they're motivated. I bet you too would be motivated to work a menial job for the rest of your life if you had the threat that someone would come up with an AK-74 and blow your brains out. I bet you would be motivated too to keep on working. And when in the world did Kim Jong-un say this? At the beginning he said this could be an entire farce. We don't really have a lot of information on this. And now he's acting like Kim Jong-un himself has descended these orders to the rest of the world. Come on now.
They mistook Kim Jong-un for Mr. Lunchtime.
Yeah, they probably did. But then again, Kim Jong-un appears to be on the communist diet where he's been thinning a little bit lately. But I don't know if he's still doing that.
Открыть границу, наладить нормальный товарообмен. Ну а если северокорейские добровольцы с их артиллерийскими системами...
With their artillery systems? Oh my god, this is a joke. Okay, now it's time. We have to pull out the stat sheet. North Korean Army equip. Oh, come on. Now it's going to put in the URL. Come on now. North Korean military equipment. With their artillery systems, like they're just possessing the most high-tech stuff in the world. Here's their pistols, just to give you an idea of how backwards they are. They're still using what appears to be a copy of the Makarov, and also the Browning 1900, and that looks like the crappiest version, if that even is one of theirs, of an FN 1900 I've ever seen. Let's move on beyond this. This is terrible. And we can see that they're using a high power. I mean, like, we're they're a force to be reckoned with. They're using stamped metal submachine guns from the 40s. A force to be reckoned with. They're using World War II submachine guns that would have been used at the Battle of Stalingrad. A force to be reckoned with. They're using Sterling submachine guns that are so old that these were used as the prop guns for the stormtroopers in the original Star Wars movie. A force to be reckoned with. We can also see them using one of the cheapest Soviet-made shotguns in history. We can see them using Type 63s, which are a license-made version of the SKS. Apparently, they also have some kind of rip-off M16-looking rifle that was made by the Chinese, apparently called the Norinco CQ. Apparently, they have a couple of K2s. Don't know how they got those. Those are South Koreans. And a couple of M16s. They also use SVDs, kind of normal. But let's get down to the artillery systems. Oh my god, look at the tanks. This is awful. One second, let's get down to the tanks. Let's see what they got. Well, no, artillery. We got to get to the artillery. Oh, come on. It looks like they're not even going to show us the artillery. Howitzers. Okay. Tell me these World War II howitzers are modern. Anyways, we're going to get on with the video, so that way we don't sit here too long. You know what? I think, by and large, we've generally disproved this guy's comments as just stupid. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Russian State TV. We're going to try and not go down as many rabbit holes since we went down enough on that one. And so with that, I'm going to show you all the next thing that Russian State TV has said today. And it pretty much speaks for itself. And of course, well, I actually think you'll be able to read that. So here's the video.
Какая сейчас часть суши? 1/7, 1/6? 7 теперь, да? Пока. Но ведь, как вы знаете, да, сейчас, как мудро говорят, к новому учебному году не спешите покупать контурные карты. Ну, просто бессмысленно. Так что пока 1/7. Ну, немножко подождем.
Now this guy is literally saying they're just going to annex Ukraine and make it a part of the Russian Federation. Now they're not even trying to make it a farce on Russia TV that they're trying to liberate them or anything. They're literally trying to conquer them. And they're not even going to try and sugarcoat that anymore either. So with that, we're going to get away from this clown, because if I talked about him too long, there's just too many cracks in this guy's mental stability even. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next segment of news, actually, which will be our location unknowns and the Kharkiv segment as well. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the next segment of news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, for our first question segment, up first, we have a $50 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, Enforcer and Matt will there be a larger counteroffensive in mid-October or November once the Lend-Lease armor and ammo is delivered? And will that include tanks, HIMARS, and some jets from NATO and the U.S.?
I don't know if it would include tanks and jets from the NATO countries. We're not entirely sure about that, because while we've seen a decent amount of, I guess you could say, Soviet vintage armor that may have been heavily upgraded, either a PT-91 from Poland or T-72Ms from, say, Slovakia and other countries, I haven't really heard about the West, the far West countries like the Germans, the French, the British, or the Americans planning to send over any of their main battle tanks. So I don't know if those will be included. And I think that the Polish and most Eastern European countries have by and large already given most, if not all, of their Soviet-made tanks to Ukraine for them to use. So in that regard, I don't think tanks would be included. Jets, we've heard a lot about jets being sent, a lot of the Soviet vintage jets like the MiG-29s and the Su-25s, but we've never seen them arrive. And also, I saw official confirmation today from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that they've heard nothing about Northern Macedonia offering their Soviet-made aircraft to Ukraine to use in the war. So that kind of dispels that question for the future. So I don't know if it would include tanks or jets, for that matter, but it will definitely include more artillery systems like the HIMARS. That's something that we can almost bank on. So with that, I hope that answers that part of the question. Also, to answer the question about a counterattack, at least in terms of climate and weather, the climate and the weather would be most conducive to Ukrainian counteroffensive in the late fall during the Rasputitsa season. And so we would most likely see large strides and efforts being made by the Ukrainians in that part of the year to try and push the Russians out, because, of course, the Russians won't be able to practice their strategies, well, not strategy, their doctrines normally, where they can have spread out tank formations, and almost all of their vehicles are going to be relegated to the paved roads only, because moving off of them will most likely mean that that tank gets bogged down right on the spot and cannot be recovered. So with that, I hope that does answer your question, and I thank you so much for the support. It helps out our channel so much to get support from our viewers, because that's the only way we do things. And also, I tried, with a little bit of free time I had today, I tried to watch some YouTube videos with Matthew and also my mom, which I'll be talking about here in a minute. But it's kind of crazy to see how many ads are run on a normal YouTube video. It was almost like having a commercial break on TV to just click on a single video and watch it. And that's something that I'm still proud that we do here on this channel, is that we do not, it looks like we may be having some connectivity issues with the stream. Let me check that real quick. It looks like we shouldn't be, just making sure though. But still, where was I with that? Do you know where I left off, Matthew?
I think you were saying something about the ads on YouTube videos.
Oh, yeah. So the ads are unbelievable, and I'm still very proud to know that we do not run ads on our YouTube videos. That's something I hate watching on other channels, and we make sure to cut that out here. And so I thank you so much for supporting the channel, because it's the only way we keep it running. And so with that, I hope we were able to answer the question. I hope you do enjoy the ad-free experience, and hopefully we provide a decent amount of reliable information. And so with that, we are now on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Gary Robbins, who says, will Ukraine get longer range HIMARS to go after the Kerch Bridge and Sevastopol?
That's a great question. As far as we've heard, the United States has denied sending or having the idea of sending ATACMS missiles for the HIMARS to use. I'm not entirely sure why the reasoning makes any sense, because they say if we send the ATACMS, then the Russians will take that as we're directly involved in the war. And at this point, considering that they've literally sent over the MLRS that would be used to fire ATACMS, kind of feel like based off of that criteria, we're already directly involved in the war, and so I don't really see the harm in sending ATACMS. So the answer to that, as far as we know right now, is that no, there have not been any ATACMS sent yet. But that doesn't mean that they won't be sent in the future, and that doesn't mean that they may have been secretly sent, and they may just be waiting for things to escalate diplomatically in between the Russians and the United States for the United States to say, okay, well, you've got HIMARS, well, you've got ATACMS now, and they could have had them since the start. I'm not really sure about that right now. So for right now, at least the hardcore answer and proof that we have is that no, we have not sent any ATACMS over, and it doesn't seem like we have any plans of doing that soon. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're now going to move on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to move on into the next bit of news.
And real quick, before we get to that last question of the segment, I do have a poll to go over real quick. And the question was, should we continue to analyze Russian state propaganda on stream? And I put this poll up because I constantly see people say that they cannot stand watching the propaganda. However, if you've been around for a long time, you know that we play it simply to analyze it and to find out what they're saying. But we go into it knowing that everything they say is false. But it looks like 68% of you said, yes, I appreciate the breakdown. 22% said, not really, it isn't useful. And only 10% said, no, I do not want to see it at all. So very clearly, a majority for continuing to show it on stream and analyzing it. And Enforcer, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, but go right ahead.
Oh, nah, I don't have anything to add on that one. It's just interesting to see the results because I thought that most people did enjoy watching the breakdowns of Russian propaganda. I'm glad that people do because there's a lot of people out there who literally bank on that stuff and just believe it because it's said by the Russians and they're not, they're not American, so I can believe them. That's not really a good way to say it, but they're against American interests, and so I can believe them because they really know what's going on. And I always like to go and dispel it so that way if anyone's watching, that may be on the fence, they can see why it makes so little sense. So with that, we're now going to be moving, I think, out of this question segment. Do we have another question left?
We had one last question, actually, and this last super chat is from Kaltenberg, who puts in a $20 donation and says, always wear clean underwear.
I don't know what that's in specific reference to, Kaltenberg, but I always wear clean underwear, and also I always shower daily. I think hygiene is incredibly important, and so I always highly recommend that you at least shower once a day, maybe 3 times a day if you're feeling it. Of course, I'm kidding with that, but still.
Maybe that was intended for the Russians, maybe when they were running around scared, without saying the word Krampus.
Yeah, I think I know what Kaltenberg meant now. So we will make sure to remind them of that every once in a while. And thank you so much once again for the support, Kaltenberg. You've helped out this channel immensely over the time that we've been able to run. And I thank you so much for helping us to keep this thing going. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next segment of news, which will be the location unknowns and the Kharkiv area. But before we get there, I actually would like to take a quick moment because it seems like the bad times have passed behind the scenes, and I would like to share with y'all what's been happening behind the scenes, just so that way y'all know. Y'all may have heard me allude a couple of times that things were going on in the background that were kind of a little bit tough on Matthew and me, and were taking up a lot of our time and also adding a lot of stress. Y'all didn't know it at the time, and now that I've asked them and made sure it was okay with them, I will tell y'all, both of our our mom and our dad got kidney stones at the exact same time and pretty much had to go to the hospital, literally one after the other. It took up a lot of our time. It was incredibly stressful to both of us because they were in such searing pain when they were about to go to the hospital that we really didn't know what was going on with them. We didn't know if they had like a ruptured spleen or what, because, they both said the pain was terrible. It was unbelievable to them. And so we were trying to get them to the hospital and all that stuff and take care of them in the background. Thank God that one of them got our dad got a kidney stone on Monday because, it was the off day. And so I had nothing but time to tend to it. And even if it was on an on day, I would have just canceled the stream. But that's what we've been dealing with in the background. And luckily, it's all over. It seems like both of them have gotten over it, at least for now. And hopefully it will remain that way. But I just wanted to tell y'all because I was talking to them about it today. I was like, are y'all fine with me telling people about that since no one really knows who y'all are or who I really am? And they were like, yeah, we're fine with it. So I just thought I would tell y'all as well to let y'all know what had been happening behind the scenes. But with that, We're now going to continue on into the next segment of news. If you have sent in a super chat, we will make sure to answer every single one of them by the end of the night. And also, please make sure to send in a live chat with @Enforcer Matt in it with your question attached, so that way Matthew can gather them up and make sure to read them off to all of y'all as well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the location unknowns, which we have a small amount of today, which I'm pretty happy about. Starting off, we can see a Russian truck being destroyed by the Ukrainians. And here's the video. We see the thick black smoke of death coming off of a vehicle, letting us know that it has been destroyed. And that explosion right there lets us know that it's been finished off. We now see a Russian armored personnel carrier scooting by the burning and exploding truck with troops on top. And it looks like there's actually some kind of a APC right there. Can't really tell if that was a Ukrainian one or not, actually. It kind of didn't look like... No, that's probably a BTR. I can't see a Z on it, though. Oh, it's on fire as well. No, it's BTR-U2. We can see the turret there. So, it looks like the BTR also caught on fire. We don't know if it exploded or burned to the ground or not. We didn't see that on film. But still, great to see that they were able to knock out a Russian supply truck, I'm assuming, considering that the explosion looked like it may have had ammunition in it. With that, that's the end of the video, and we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we've seen everyone's favorite, a Stugna attack. We now see them firing the Stugna. It's heading towards the target. Then it slams right into him, knocking the vehicle out. Another takedown for the Ukrainians, and another Russian vehicle lost. Always a great thing to see, and I hope that the Ukrainians can continue to destroy these vehicles at a higher rate, so that way the war can hopefully end sooner, and the suffering of normal Ukrainian citizens can come to an end. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the second to last bit of Location Unknown news, where we see the Ukrainians reclaiming an abandoned BMP-1. Not really reclaiming, it's more like they're claiming it initially because it's actually a Russian BMP. And we see them walking past it right here. It looks like it's really old. And well, this one's actually really devoid of trash from what we can tell, which is a first. But it still looks like this BMP is old as Methuselah. This thing was what Moses used to drive across the Red Sea once he parted it. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the final bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian soldier rescued a small deer. These are actually called fawns, just to let everyone know. But the little caption here said tiny deer. And so I made sure to keep the spirit of that by saying small deer. But here's the video of a Ukrainian soldier taking care of a fawn on the front lines. What a cute little fawn.
А мама не йде його? Повинна. Але він нормальний, не цей? Та ні, все нормально. Припуганий нафіг. Ага. То може то, що від мами відбився. Звісно, вона в шокі. Манюня. Ні, сіла.
We now see them wrapping it up in a blanket. And that thing is going to make some delicious venison. And of course, I'm just kidding. A lot of people in Alabama would wait for that thing to grow another year and then eat it. But still, I think that fawn was really precious. And I think that says a lot about the kindness of Ukrainian soldiers, is that there's an artillery barrage going on around them right now. And they still go out of their way to take care of wild animals like that little fawn right there. Who knows what happened to the mother? And that may be why they're taking care of the fawn, is that they could have seen it cradled near its mother that may have been killed in an artillery barrage. But what a sweet little thing right there. And I have to say, I'm always a huge fan. I've seen deer my entire life. Where I used to live, it was a daily sight to see them in massive groups. But it's always a sweet thing to see a fawn. Those were somewhat rare for us to see in the countryside. And whenever you saw them, even after living out in the country for 10 years, if you saw him, you go, oh, look, it's a fawn. Because that's just everyone's reaction to him. Still, really sweet. and it's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians did take care of this little fawn, and are going to, I assume, make it a mascot of their unit, considering they're wrapping it up in the blanket. But with that, on that nice little happy note, that is the end of our location unknown news, and we're now going to start moving into the Kharkiv area and covering the news there. Starting off near the village of Vesely, we did see the Azov unit in action in the area. Here's the video. We can hear them firing a machine gun, and we can see the Azov soldier reloading the RPG and getting it ready to fire. You now see him running forward, leveling the RPG, and then firing it. The video ends right there. It's a short video, but it still does show that the Azov unit that is in the Kharkiv area, I believe it's actually the Kyiv battalion of the Azov regiment, is fighting in the Kharkiv area still, and we got some video evidence to confirm that today. With that, we're now going to be moving into the city of Kharkiv, where we have seen something that kind of ties into the initial Israel news that we covered tonight, where I was saying it would be nice to see those Iron Dome systems in Kharkiv, because we did see over last night more Russian missiles slammed into Kharkiv city. Here's the footage showing that. When you see the MLRS barrage peppering in part of the city, and like we saw in the Gaza Strip, where the rockets were flying into Ukrainian airspace and then were promptly shot down, an Iron Dome system could have intercepted most, or if not all, of these rockets before they were able to hit the town. With that, that's the end of the video, and of course, an unfortunate sight. It looks like it did hit a residential area, and the question always comes up, did it kill civilians or not? How many did it wound? And unfortunately, right now, we do not have any figures. Hopefully, it didn't wound or kill anyone, but once again, that's wishful thinking, as a barrage like that always ends up having a victim somewhere. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv area and further down the line. We haven't gotten a lot of news from this area. It seems like it's died down a little bit. Last week, it looked like it was actually picking up, but now in terms of video evidence, it's died down. And so going off of that, it appears that the front is falling static once more. But as we move beyond the Chuhuyev and Balaklia area, which have nothing to report, as well as the Slovyansk area and the Cave Monastery, which have nothing to report, we can see the action is picking up in, I guess you could call, the Lysychansk finger, which is really starting to become the Seversk finger now. But before we get there, we have, of course, covered the last news segment already, and so we're going to move into another 3 questions, answer those, and then we'll be moving into our final news segment of the night, which will include the northern Donbass, the southern Donbass, the southern front, and the speech from President Zelensky, our last news segment of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so up next, we have a $20 super chat from TelMed, who says, I saw pics of a destroyed Russian R-439 MD2, and I have no idea what it is.
What's the name of that again?
It's an R-439 MD2.
R-439 MD2. It looks like it may be a command version of a BTR, if I had to take a basic guess. It's a signal vehicle, so apparently it's a communications version of a BTR. So I hope that answers your question. There's not really a lot for me to add on this, because this one's brand new to me as well, and it doesn't really look like there's a lot written about it on the internet. Maybe right here, maybe we can find something on this. Well, apparently not. That's a forum. So I hope that answers the question. Apparently it's some kind of a signal or communications BTR, and I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Volodymyr Yaskulka, who says, when the people choose bread between bread and freedom, they ultimately lose everything, including bread. From Stepan Bandera, copyright 2022, and that was actually written in Ukrainian, I do believe, and hopefully that was an accurate translation.
Well, I thank you very much for translating that, Matthew, and also I thank you very much for the support, Stefan. That sounds a lot like a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and this is quoted a lot in modern America, but it's where Benjamin Franklin said, if one is to give up their liberty for safety, they deserve neither. That's actually something that's been echoed by a lot of leaders throughout history, not just Benjamin Franklin, who was a founding father of this country, but I would have to say that that quote is certainly one that stands up to the modern day. And that's something that I've seen that is, and I have to go into a little bit of an aside here on a quick one. We'll make sure it's quick. On people, because everyone always wants to shift blame around, but seeing how things have unfolded in this war, you can kind of see what natural human behavior is in this certain instance. You say that people, if people would give up their safety or their freedom for bread, they don't really deserve neither. We can see in this war, when the price of oil went up in the United States, which was completely detached, mind you, from the war in Ukraine. We see that now clearly through the statistics of the price of oil dropping while the war in Ukraine is still ongoing, which shows that that price spike was not at all attached to the war, because it would still be high if it was. A lot of people in the United States said, you know what? Screw it. We don't need to support Ukraine. We need to just give up and stop supporting them, so that way the price of oil goes down, and just give them and just sign them off for the slaughter. That's what some, well, not a lot, but that's what some people in the United States were saying. And what's always interesting to me is that if that was to happen, those same people would sit there and go, oh, you know, the greedy corporations, or they would blame it on someone, allowed for the Ukrainians to get steamrolled so that way they could keep the price of oil low. And that's always something weird to me, is that it's kind of a, for someone out there, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. Because if you sit there and support Ukraine, everyone's going to be sitting there and saying, oh, you're supporting their interests, and you're just screwing over the common people in the United States, even though they're not even attached to each other. Just the mere mention that Ukraine may have something to do with the increasing oil prices leads people to want to just give up, so that way they can continue to get cheaper oil, or at least the idea or the dream of getting cheaper oil. And then if you actually did give up, then they would be sitting there saying, oh, the price of oil is cheap, but it's really the greedy corporations that wanted to make sure that they could continue to profit, or something like that. And it's always interesting to me, and I think that whenever support for a war, and also the whole freedom and bread thing is considered, it's a lot of people always want to shift the blame to some abstract group. And I really think that these decisions come down to every single person themselves. That's how a lot of modern countries work, and I think that's how it kind of should be viewed with how these decisions are made nationally. But I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you so much for the support once again. It helps out our channel a lot, and I'm glad that you do enjoy what we put out. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Compound David, who said, did Ukraine bait and switch by saying that we will attack Kherson, but are really going to Izium?
They may have. That's something that we have been hearing about, although I can't really see significant video evidence showing frontline movements near Izium or any kind of official reports. We have heard that they've retaken a village here and there, but still at the same time, it seems like they were actually seriously considering a counterattack here, and everyone was going, oh, look, they're saying it's happening in advance so that way they can save the Ukrainian civilians. And that was actually a pretty reasonable assumption, that they were going to give Ukrainian civilians a time to get out of the way, because, you know, that's kind of what we did with Iraq. You know, George Bush got on TV and said, you have 24 hours to leave Iraq, or else hellfire's coming down on you. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, look, you fooled me once, you can't fool me again. And that's what happened with Iraq, and we kind of gave a build-up to it and a lead-up to it of a time frame. And so I would largely assume that may be the case. It may have been entirely a ruse, but at the same time, with them destroying the 3 major bridge crossings across the Dnipro River in that area, it seems to me, and also their taking of the town of Viskapilia, which they did take, it seemed like they were prepping and getting ready for a large counterattack, and whether it happened or not, we're not entirely sure, because there was a media blackout in the area, and we just don't really know anything. You know, we don't know anything beyond what we've been hearing as rumors. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, but I do think it would be plausible to say, it's as equally plausible to say that that was a ruse to start counterattacks near Izium, but I'm not entirely sure, and we haven't heard of a lot of ground being taken in the Izium area. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And I think that may have actually been the last question of this question segment, if I'm correct, Matthew.
And that was it for this segment. So now it is time for the last segment of news.
And it is. And so if you did throw in a super chat, we will get to all of them for the night, and we'll also answer as many live chat questions as possible. And so with that, we're now moving on into the last segment of news, where we can see that the 503rd hit Russian forces somewhere around the Seversky Donets River, just west of the area of, let me make sure I get this correct, Lehman? Yes, just west of the area of Lehman. And so here's the video. Pretty fun music, but I have to keep it muted because it is copyrighted. We see the Russians moving amongst all of the destroyed houses. Of course, moving in large groups, scurrying into the next house. If you can call it a house, it's really more like 4 walls. You now see more Russians packing into the house, and even more behind them. And I like Ryan Christie's comment. We're not going to read that off on stream, but I do have to say that you must have a crystal ball, because I think that's what's about to happen to him. Even more are coming down. They're packing this house full. It must be a block party. And now the artillery slammed right down into the building. Of course, a precise Ukraine artillery shot, which they've always put out the, I guess you could say, the bar of excellence in terms of marksmanship. Oh, Matthew, we got a new bot. It's not a cam bot, it's a Bitcoin bot.
Wow. And it has the same format of the cam bot.
Yeah, it does. That's crazy. But you now see artillery still raining down on that house. We don't know how the Russians are doing inside, but I can tell you, as a bit of a mind reader and a bit of a empath, I don't think they're doing well in there. So with that, that's the end of the video, and I think we just saw an entire platoon get dusted. Not really sure, but we will look into that in the future if we can get any supporting evidence to that. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the way and more towards the Lysychansk area, where we've seen another Stugna attack by the Ukrainians. And so, here's the video. You can see the Stugna being fired and traveling on its way. Still traveling. We see another Stugna launch. And now we see the first vehicle getting hit. Some pieces flying off at it in multiple directions. We now see a supply truck being hit. Another supply truck. Another supply truck. And another one. Well, actually, that's the same one in a loop. Now see it veering off into the tree line, where they then pull over and try and figure out, I think it ain't got no gas in it. And that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, it's pretty nice to see that these Stugna attacks continue and are still wreaking decent amounts of damage on Russian forces, as each bit of damage brought onto the Russians is a little bit closer to the end of the war. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we see Russian tanks and forces firing into the area of Seversk, although them being in the middle of a field looking at a tree line kind of throws into question if they're really at Seversk or not. But this is where this video was listed, and so we're going to show it. We see one of the tanks firing. We see 2 BMP-2s over there to the left side of the tank. We see that one of the tanks firing again. Whoa. What in the world was that noise that came out of this guy who's filming? He just went, whoop. Whoop. What in the world? I've never heard a noise like that come out of anyone before, because I know it's not. I know the noise in this video isn't being put in a lower pitch because everyone else sounds normal, but this guy who goes whoop, whoop. When you see them still firing, you still don't see a town in this, since they're firing at a tree line in this video. That's the end of the video, and it doesn't really look like they're hitting anything significant, at least in this video. And also, whoop. And so with that, we are now on to the next bit of news further down the line. We do know, now, we did get some video confirmation with that they are apparently, according to that video, close enough to be firing on Seversk, and so we did adjust the front line accordingly. We did know that the Russians apparently had moved closer and closer to Seversk over the past few weeks, making very small gains per week, but we think that the front line somewhere around this area, and thanks to that video evidence, we were finally able to adjust it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down to the area of Berestove, where you can see the Russians using a handheld flamethrower. Of course, this was uploaded by Russia Today. So here's the video. You can see them firing off these handheld flamethrowers. You now see the guy picking up his AK. You see them firing into the distance, but not receiving any return fire. Always an interesting aspect of Russian firefights. That's the end of the video, and we can see them rolling a BMP-3, which must be rare at this point, forward to help support the infantry, although they're not really in a firefight. Pretty interesting look at that, and apparently it's an RPOA Schmel. So, RPOA Schmel. You know, something about this weapon system schmells. So let's take a look at this. So it's a rocket-propelled infantry flamethrower a Bumblebee, which is an insect. According to Wikipedia, the bumblebee is any of over 250 species of the genus Bombus. Definitely not what we're looking at here. But apparently it's a man-portable, disposable, rocket-assisted flamethrower. We do have something like this that the Americans used to use back in the 70s and 80s. If you play any grand strategy war game, you'll see that some units, I believe it's the engineer units, are equipped with something like this in the U.S. And also I believe that there's something actually issued in real life, if you're going off of at least the strategic war games where you're like top down on a table and you're looking at the spreadsheet of an entire squad. But anyways, moving on from that, let's see here. Apparently the Ukrainians actually use these as well, and see, they were used in Afghanistan and the Chechen wars. They were also used, oh my god, they were used in the Beslan school siege. If y'all know anything about that, that was one of the worst hostage situations ever. Not really because of the people who were holding the hostages, but because of the Russian response, where they pretty much pumped sarin gas into the area where all the hostages were held and killed off hundreds of them, and apparently were also firing handheld flamethrowers into the building. I ended up killing a lot of kids, actually. You can see here the kill count with 333 people killed out of the 1,100 that were hostages. And 186 of those were kids. So that kind of gives you a perspective of how the Russians even treat their own citizens. But still, an interesting look into the Schmel, and I have to say that the footage here and the validity of it seems kind of schmelly. But with that, we're now going to be moving further down the line, and out of the Seversk finger, where it appears that action is ongoing. It is elevated compared to everywhere else in the front lines, but isn't suggesting massive Russian offensives or movements. For that, we're now going to be moving down into the area of Svitlodarsk, where we've seen that the Russians were hit by a drone somewhere in this area. And so, here's the video of a Ukrainian drone dropping dropping bomblets into the trenches. You see them preparing to drop it. We now see them dropping it, and the bomblet exploded. And it looks like a Russian soldier may be taking a nap. We hear Matthew rustling and shuffling over there.
Oh, you can hear that?
Yeah, I heard a little bit of rustling. Muted. Oh, no, you weren't muted. I heard it a little bit, but we can see that apparently it did get one Russian soldier, but due to that being a little bit difficult to look at, we're just going to cut the video off there. We're now going to be moving on down to the Orlivka area where we can see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians. This is apparently old footage taken in late July, but the video was uploaded today, and so we did include it in the news, although do consider this apparently happened about a week ago. We see the Ukrainian drone looking down towards the ground, and we can see an artillery barrage, what appears to be an MLRS barrage, coming in on this area. You see the drone still surveying the area. This looks to be a large rail yard that they're bombarding here. And we see the MLRS barrage kind of landing to the lower part of the rail yard, kind of in the tree line and in this field. We do not see any explosions or burning of vehicles at this point in the video. See them reviewing the area and the damage that has been caused by the MLRS strike, but we still don't see any burning of Russian vehicles. And so the barrage appears to have not been able to destroy any vehicles. We don't know about infantry because we can never really confirm that stuff on film, but we did see the Ukrainians conducting an artillery barrage on the area. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the front line into our next bit of news, which is more in the Pokrovsk area, and it's a little bit of a sombering image. Of course, in war, everyone takes casualties. The Russians, of course, taking far more than the Ukrainians, as far as we're able to tell. And we can see that some of these soldiers have been put to rest and are being honored by the citizens of their country as heroes, as another cross is being planted on a fresh grave. Freedom does come at a price, and that price is always paid in blood. And we can see that some Ukrainian soldiers have ended up having to pay that price themselves. And of course, their sacrifice has helped continue to keep Ukraine free for 6 months at this point, and hopefully well into the future and for the rest of all time. It's an unfortunate little picture, but I did want to show it because it is an unfortunate reality of war. We're now going to be moving out of the Pokrovsk area and down to the southern front, where we have our last 2 bits of news before we get to the speech from President Zelensky. Starting off, we can see a picture of Russian soldiers that have been captured by the Azov battalion from the Kharkiv area here on the southern front. If we look at them all, it looks like they may be regretting their decisions, and it looks like they have a new kind of camouflage pattern here, at least these 3 in the middle, and we can also see some mismatched equipment on this guy. All of them look like they haven't taken showers in a long time, and some of their equipment appears to be in rags, at least some of it. Some of it's actually in kind of decent condition. But with that, we don't know how these soldiers were captured, whether it was in a Russian raid that failed and then they were surrounded and captured, or if it was a Ukrainian offensive where they were able to capture these guys in some kind of raid of their own. We're not entirely sure, but another 5 prisoners were captured, and it is great to see. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our final bit of news, which I found to be incredibly interesting today because this is the second time that this channel and its coordinates that have been put out in its number station Morse code message has been correct. If y'all remember a while ago, and I'll pull this up on Google Maps just to let y'all know, we've been putting out coordinates to what we believe to be Russian ammo depots across the entirety of the country, at least in the Russian-occupied areas. And today we actually saw that the Ukrainians bombarded an area that looked to be on the southern side of Tokmak City, which would be near this area right here. This is the exact building compound that we highlighted as a Russian ammo depot. Now, some of y'all may be wondering, why am I highlighting these as ammo depots? What information do I have? we have a general rule that I pointed out multiple times on stream that the buildings have to be large and they have to be conducive to supply operations. And so going off of that, I set out on an endeavor to see if I marked these and made a bookmark of them as to which ones I believed were being used as ammo depots, would these depots eventually be hit and destroyed? And so far, the answer has been yes. It seems that most of the depots, about half of them right now, and some of them may be destroyed further on in the future, have been hit by the Ukrainians in their artillery barrages. And so it seems that the general rule that I have laid out is largely true. This video will also back up that today, showing this area, the general area, being hit by a Ukrainian barrage. So without further ado, here's the video showing Ukrainian missiles slamming into a Russian ammo depot in the distance in the city of Tokmak.
Ебать! БК загорелась. БК горит. Ебать. Охуенно. Красавчики. Просто. Как это
We see the
красиво,
barrage landing there in the distance.
Просто.
And when you see a town, we can see a stack right there, a chimney, if you'd like to call it. So let's see if we can geolocate ourselves a little chimney. Little chimney, little chimney. Little chimney. Is that the same one? It looks like red brick, white on top. Red brick, at least. It looks like there's some sheds in between them and that. So let's go further here. Sheds? Maybe? See, if they're looking at it this way. If they're looking at it from over here, and that stack, it's right there. And further down the line, in a straight line, from that stack to here, it looks like it may be hitting the exact spot that we laid out on coordinates if they're looking at it from here. We do see some of the sheds. We do see some trees over here where these sheds could be. They could be looking at it from here, looking out in that direction. And that would line up. But then again, I'm not entirely sure because I'm doing this geolocating on the spot, so I might be wrong. But we may have literally given out the location of a Russian ammo depot that the Ukrainians have now hit about a week after we gave out the coordinates. Now, I'm not saying they got the coordinates from us. I'm saying that the general assumptions that we've been making about what kind of buildings the Russians are most likely using and where as ammo depots appear to be a pretty good rule to go by. So with that, we're going to let the video continue. And also, I saw Edward K saying chimneys are everywhere. That's true, but this is geolocated to Tokmak already.
А, это БК догорает. Да нахуй. Просто великолепно.
The barrage is still continuing.
Я чудово. Просто красота. Молодцы, ребята.
So with that, that's the end of the video, and it's a really interesting thing to see that we may have actually been able to find out where a Russian ammo depot was just based off of a few general rules, and it appears that it may have been struck. We're still going to try and get some evidence for that. It seems like out of everywhere in the city, this would be the most reasonable place for the ammo depot to be. It's right near the railroad, so, you know, equipment can be railroaded in and then dropped off here at this specific area, and then all of these long buildings can be used to unload trucks and also store the supplies pretty efficiently. So it seems to make sense, but we'll still be waiting for some confirmation on that. But so far, it looks like we may have gotten a winner chicken dinner here, and again. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of all the Southern Front news. We've gotten some pretty interesting news, but it's not showing any major offensives or events. We're now going to be moving up to Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, which will be rounding out our news segment for the night, and then afterwards we'll be moving into the question segment. And so the stream is not over, but the news segment will be after the speech. And so, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Українці і українки, з наших портів сьогодні вийшли 3 судна із зерном на експорт. З Одеси і з Чорноморська. Майже 60 тисяч тонн кукурудзи на борту, яку очікують споживачі Туреччини, Британії, Ірландії. В порт Чорноморська направляється перше з 24 лютого нове судно на завантаження. Головне зараз постійне нарощування експорту. В цьому зацікавлені всі, але всі адекватні світові суб'єкти. Чим більше нашого зерна буде на світовому ринку, тим меншим буде врожай політичного хаосу в країнах, передусім Африки і Азії. Але не тільки там. Маємо пам'ятати, що цьогоріч в Європі значно більший попит на імпортне продовольство, ніж передбачалося. Європейський врожай менше через спеку. А от український врожай зернових та олійних, скоріш за все, відповідатиме прогнозам. Очікується понад 65 мільйонів тонн. Тому якщо партнери виконують свою частину зобов'язань згідно із зерновою ініціативою, безпекову частину, і не допустять нових російських провокацій по відношенню до нашого експорту, то продовольчу кризу, яка була такою загрозливою для світу, можна буде подолати. А от на енергоринку, і особливо для європейських споживачів, ситуація продовжує бути дуже небезпечною через цинічний і прорахований газовий шантаж Росії. Замість того, щоб постачати газ на територію Європи, згідно з контрактами, Росія навіть просто спалює його і вже не один тиждень. Для чого вона це робить? Щоб ціни в Європі ще більш зросли, щоб звичайні європейці ще більш постраждали, щоб усім на континенті було ще складніше підготуватися до зими. Це прояв свідомої антиєвропейської політики, антилюдської політики Росії внаслідок старих помилок європейців, які не хотіли бачити, що Газпром, російські газопроводи в обхід України – це така ж зброя для Росії, як танки, як артилерія, а мішень для них кожен з нас, кожен в Європі. І захищатися зараз ми маємо всі разом. Разом готуватися до нового опалювального сезону, разом відповідати на будь-які провокації Росії в енергосфері, разом напрацьовувати санкційні кроки у відповідь на російський шантаж і терор. Сьогодні окупанти створили чергову надзвичайно ризиковану ситуацію для всіх в Європі. Вони обстріляли Запорізьку АЕС, причому двічі за день. Це найбільша атомна станція на нашому континенті, і будь-які обстріли цього об'єкту – це відвертий, зухвалий злочин, акт терору. Росія повинна нести відповідальність вже за сам факт створення загрози АЕС. І це не тільки ще один аргумент на користь визнання Росії державою спонсором тероризму. Це аргумент і на користь того, щоб застосувати жорсткі санкції проти всієї російської атомної галузі, від Росатому до усіх пов'язаних компаній і осіб. Це суто питання безпеки. Той, хто створює ядерні загрози для інших народів, сам точно не здатний безпечно використовувати атомні технології. Провів сьогодні нараду щодо санкційної політики, конфіскації російських активів. Як доповіли урядовці, вже примусово вилучено в Україні активів на 28 мільярдів гривень. Ця робота продовжується. Ще більш ніж 900 об'єктів, які належать саме російській державі, пропонується конфіскувати. А якщо оцінювати пакет власності не тільки держави-терориста, але також її резидентів, то йдеться про 36 тисяч позицій на вилучення. Все це буде направлено на відшкодування збитків, які Росія завдає війною і терором. Також заслухав результати роботи групи з розробки і провадження міжнародного компенсаційного механізму та конфіскації російських активів за кордоном. Всі наші партнери активно над цим працюють. В Європі, в США йде робота над законопроектами, які розширять можливості для конфіскації російських активів для України. І спалений російськими ударами Донбас, знущання окупантів над Харковом, Миколаєвом, обстріли Запоріжжя, Дніпропетровщини, Сумщини, Чернігівщини, Київщини, Житомирщини. Все це в Одеській області та в інших регіонах України – це те, за що Росія обов'язково заплатить і політично, і фінансово, і своїм же майбутнім, яке Росія втрачає з кожним ударом по нам. Говорив сьогодні з президентом Малаві, ще одна африканська держава, вже 9-та, з якою Україна контактує вперше на найвищому рівні за всю нашу історію незалежності. Запевнив пана президента в тому, що Україна докладне всіх зусиль, щоб кожна країна, яка має зацікавленість у нашій агропродукції могла забезпечити своє споживання. Обговорили також інші питання стабільності і нашу співпрацю в міжнародних організаціях. Підписав також указ про нагородження наших воїнів. 192 учасника бойових дій відзначено державними нагородами, 18 з них, на жаль, посмертно. Вічна вдячність усім, хто воює за нашу велику державу. Дякую, великий народу України. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the video. And that is the end of the day 163 news of the war in Ukraine. If you're here for the news segment alone, I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you did enjoy. If you would like, please make sure to subscribe, because these streams do come out every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we make sure to try and give as much news as possible on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. So with that, we're now going to be moving into the question segment, and before we do, I actually would like to address something that I've been watching in the live chat occur a little bit, which is apparently something that someone has said about hunting. Now, of course, this channel does not really make an opinion about much of everything unless it's pertaining directly to the Ukraine war, and I do know that there's a little bit of a thing going on politically with this kind of stuff, so we do not make an opinion. Yet, somehow, it kind of goes through a loophole in the rules where that can be talked about. I would like it to be known, though, that if you put out an opinion in the live chat and people don't agree with you, that does not mean that they have to agree with you, and that does not mean you're being bullied if they say you're disagreeing with them. I've also seen a little bit of comments being made in somewhat of a malicious light, calling people psychos for doing a certain thing, and of course, that doesn't really lead to polite discourse. But I would like to ask if everyone could stop talking about that and just move on. Because it's not going to go anywhere. Just because one shares their opinion does not mean they're changing the world, and I would just ask that everyone keeps it civil, specifically since this channel is about the war in Ukraine and not about hunting. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the question segment, and with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving into our final question segment of the night, up first, we have a $20 super chat from Boxfish, who says, keep up the good work.
And thank you so much, Boxfish, for the support. We will try our best to keep it up, of course. And thank you once again so much for enjoying this channel and helping us to have the ability to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Greg Sheely for putting in a $10 super chat. Without a comment, though, but thank you very much, Greg, for the support of the channel. And we appreciate you for being around for a very long time. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, clean underwear belongs in the closet.
Well, and thank you very much for the support. And yes, clean underwear does belong in the closet. I would hate to know that people are putting dirty underwear inside of their closet. That just seems kind of a little unsanitary to me. But, you know, everyone does them. But thank you once again for the support.
I feel like we're missing out on something on that joke. Like, did we miss something at some point?
I do feel like we're missing on something, but I'm not entirely sure. But I do thank you for the support. I don't know where this is all coming from, because we did also have Kaltenberg talking about underwear tonight, but I don't really know. But thank you once again. I hope that does address the comment, at least in a way, as far as we're able to understand it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Enforcer for President, one of our channel regulars, and with that cool username there, who says, thank you for all your hard work. Y'all are the best. Slava Ukraine, and yeah!
It came through. And also, thank you so much for the support, Enforcer for President. It helps us out greatly, and of course, we rely on y'all to keep us running. Now, no pressure or anything, but thank you once again for helping us to keep this stream running, and thank you so much for the kind compliments. I would assume that you have pretty high regards for the channel and who we are, considering that your username is Enforcer for President, so thank you so much for being such a big fan and enjoying what we do here. Hopefully you'll be enjoying all the other things that we'll be doing in the future. I'm trying to work on some stuff in the background for one of our first, well, not our first video, it'll actually be the second one of its kind. That's kind of like the government cheese video, but it'll be different in many ways that'll hopefully be a lot better. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, and thank you so much once again, Enforcer for President, for helping us to keep the lights on and keeping this thing going. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a few viewers who have cracked the code for tonight. We have a $10 super chat from WF2U who cracked it, as well as, let's see here, it was also Mark Hodges, and also Ashley also got it as well. So WF2U will take it from here and says Enforcer Matt and Enforcer. Message 1 is, and he gives coordinates, and he says the coordinates for Betalny, Crimea. In message number 2, Enigma code suspended for a while, Slava, Ukraine.
And thank you both so much for deciphering the messages. They weren't really allowed to decipher tonight. We actually suspended the Enigma code, like the other message said, for a while, because there's a little bit of a problem with transferring messages and information in Enigma, is that the Enigma machine does not have a way to encrypt numbers. So unfortunately, we aren't able to use the Enigma code to give a level of encryption to coordinates, so I had to suspend the Enigma code so that way we could continue on with the listing off the coordinates of ammo depots. Now, the coordinates, if I remember correctly, oh my god, there's actually a little thing over here on the side of my screen where I keep the coordinates and it's gone. So Matthew, if they put in the coordinates and you have that on your sheet, can you throw that in the live chat real quick so that way I can put them in?
All right, and the coordinates are coming your way right now.
All right, and let's see, they should be popping up in the live chat any second. There we go, and we'll copy that. Copy, roger, over, copy, and then we'll throw this in to here, paste. And if I remember correctly, these should be the coordinates. Actually, I think something happened because this is not the town that I listed off on the coordinates. I actually listed off one that was somewhere up here in this area. So let me look around. I'm going to have to actually go back and find that file after stream and cover that tomorrow, because each one of them does point out an exact ammo depot location that we think is an ammo depot, and I'm trying to see with these coordinates if our general rule of thumb is correct, where we say this is an ammo depot and then the Ukrainians eventually strike it and it was an ammo depot. That's what we're trying to see, is if that rule is true, because if it is, that's something that we'll try and put in stone here on the channel. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the exact town I actually put down on the coordinates. I'll have to check again, but I do thank y'all so much for deciphering it, and I think there may have been a problem with how the coordinates may have been put in. I'm not entirely sure, but we will check into it, and once again, I thank y'all so much for, of course, being our Morse code readers. I'm sorry about that little bit of a hiccup, but we will try and figure out what was wrong with that. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And I would, of course, like to give mention to WF2U, Ashley, and all of our other Morse code readers who actually know how to read that stuff, because that's really impressive. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Greedo Vizio, who says, dude, I'm from Gunnersville, Alabama. Roll Tide, LOL. And it's good to know we have some fellow Alabamians in the chat. And hello to you, and welcome to the stream as well.
And also, hello to you. Matthew, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Gunnersville is up here near Huntsville in a way. And that's actually cool. I've never been to Gunnersville, but maybe sometime around, I will drive through it. I think I've been close to Arab, and also Egypt. I just thought about that. Where do you live? I live in Egypt. Yeah, but you live in Alabama. Yeah, it's a town called Egypt. Well, who are you? I'm an Arab. Where are you from? Arab, Alabama. Oh man. Sometimes the naming of towns in America gets me, like Athens, Georgia. Y'all may remember the commercial where that gnome, I forgot the Travelocity, maybe, was the one who was running that commercial. But it's like, you booked tickets to Athens, Greece, and you ended up in Athens, Georgia. But still, I always find it funny how some towns are named like that. Like, for example, Cairo, Illinois, which is right here. I find it funny that Cairo is a town in Illinois, but it's also a town and it's also a major city in Egypt. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support. And also, it's great to hear that we do have some Alabamians here watching the stream. I actually found some very in-depth analytics on our viewers of these streams and all of our videos and where they come from, and I actually found out that our fastest growing demographic of viewers from a major city anywhere in the world right now are Londoners. They are climbing at a faster rate than ever before, and that's really interesting to me because our largest viewer base per major city is actually, believe it or not, New York City. I actually thought it'd be Los Angeles, but apparently it's New York City. So that was really cool to me, and it's also cool to go through the analytics and see what cities are doing what. maybe one day I'll go over that in a video and talk about that, because on the YouTube side of how they gather analytics, it's really cool to see that they'll actually give a general location of where a lot of the viewers are watching from. Anyways, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And it is cool to hear that you are from Gunnersville, Alabama. Gunnersville. And of course, I forgot to do this because it's Alabama, and for some reason I was just thinking it's run of the mill. But let's take a street view of Gunnersville and let's see what it looks like, because I've actually never been there. Guntersville. Here's Guntersville. And let's just drop down on one of the major roads in town. It's a normal Alabama town. This looks like every other town in Alabama. And I know this may be interesting to some of our foreign viewers are like, wow, this is like what a town in Alabama looks like. Yeah, you know, for us it's normal. For others around the world, this may not be. And also what's cool, so it looks like they actually have sidewalks, which is something that's usually devoid from most modern American towns and everywhere except for the old parts of town. But wow, that's actually really cool. What is that? Is a levee. And let's see what else they've got here. That's really cool. Y'all have got a lot of bridges in Gunnersville. And apparently a fire by the lake. I don't know if you want a fire by the lake these days, but still, thank you so much for the support. And I hope you enjoyed our quick little look into Gunnersville, Alabama. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Judo 2001, who says, do you think the Ginsu bomb is strong enough to take down Mr. Lunchtime, or would his nipple-flavored Gatorade save him? Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and to answer that question, I think that the Ginsu, while Mr. Lunchtime is a beast, I think the Ginsu would get the best of Mr. Lunchtime. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running.
And next up, I'm going to address a poll that I put a while ago. And the question was, did you expect Russia to invade Ukraine before the full-on war actually began in February? 53% of you said yes, there were clear signs. 25% said somewhat, and 22% said no, I was caught off guard. And I will say, for me personally, about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the war actually started, I don't know what it was that tipped me off, but I kept telling everybody, including the enforcer, I think a war is going to break out over there. And I'm not sure if anybody really believed me. I think they started to believe it the closer it got to when it actually started. But yeah, so 53% of you also saw it coming. So very interesting. And enforcer, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, I would actually be in the 22% that said no, I was caught off guard. Because if you go back and watch, well, it's actually, I think it's unlisted at this point, but if you watch the Train Simulator stream that I was playing when the war actually started, I was actually talking about on the stream, no, it's probably not going to happen because the Russians would be committing military and diplomatic suicide. It would just be a pointless thing to do. And then I got the news from Crazy, which is our Discord arbiter, that the war had started. And so I would actually be in that 22% to say no, I was caught off guard, because looking at it, I knew for certain, and we can see now that it did come out to be reality, it would be military suicide because their military is not up to snuff like most people believe, and it would also be economic suicide like we've seen through the sanctions, because that's the way most countries operate, is through economic sanctions these days. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, if the A-10 goes to Ukraine, would they require forward air traffic controllers, excuse me, or will the drones pinpoint targets?
I think the drones could pinpoint the targets fairly well, because if they needed forward air traffic controllers, that would most likely go into the realm of the drones, because right now the drones are kind of filling the roles of artillery spotters, which I guess you could say would be about the same as a forward air traffic controller. So in that regard, I think the drones could also help to coordinate A-10 strikes if the Ukrainians ever did get A-10s. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, Santiago Flores. That's actually a really good question. Pretty interesting one. I hope I was able to answer it fairly well and hopefully in a logical way. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Aaron Taubman, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for your support of the channel. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Sierra Star, who says, how come no counter-defensive hasn't seeped into Ruski territory?
That's a deliberate action by the Ukrainians, because if they did, the Russians could start really freaking out, and then they could mobilize the entire military. Whether it would be successful or not, having 200,000 troops in theater is a lot different than having 800,000 in the theater. And so, by that alone, you can kind of see that the Ukrainians don't really want to escalate this thing by trying to march into Russia. And also, they still have to conserve their resources to try and push the Russians out, because we can see that it is possible. The Ukrainians have done it here and there, but it's still a massive undertaking for them. And so it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to be diverting and spending those resources on a kind of a fruitless effort of trying to march into Russia. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one, and thank you so much to everyone who's helping us to keep this channel running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Trevor Allen, who says, have you heard of Help Ukraine, Oswego, New York? It is a local org on Facebook that collects and sends medical and humanitarian supplies, including art supplies for displaced children.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I have not heard about that, and it sounds pretty interesting, but one general rule that we have on this channel is that we usually don't shout out or really support any organizations that we cannot confirm for certain. And I hate to say that, and please allow me to explain so that way it doesn't sound like we're trying to shoot it down. There's a lot of people out there who are doing a lot of good, like this channel. But the thing is that we've had a lot of people come through, in my experience, and this is why I've kind of gotten really strict with this rule, is that we've had a lot of people come through and they've tried to pull a scam on this channel and all of our viewers. And they've never succeeded, of course. We've always made sure that they didn't. But they always take the guise of a Facebook nonprofit, or they're coming through saying, hey, I'm Joe Blow, I want a drone. If you raise 20,000, I'll go over to Ukraine and I'll literally become the drone. And it's always thrown a lot of questionability into my head as to whether we'll ever plug things like that on stream or not, because we're never sure if they're actually real or not. We're not really sure where the money's going, because they're not a registered nonprofit that has an actual operating history. And that's why whenever we do Sunday fundraisers and whenever we support organizations, we always like to make sure that they have either A, proven track record, or B, we know that it'll be safe through the GuideStar program on YouTube. And so that's why we always do it that way. I haven't heard about them, but it sounds like a pretty neat organization. And of course, I think people should take a look at it. I'd always just want to make sure to make this disclaimer, because while this one may be legitimate, always make sure that whenever you look at these Facebook organizations and people asking for funds on Facebook, that they're connected to some kind of larger organization, and it's not just a quick cash grab, because that could always be something that's happening. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And if it is a good organization providing that kind of materials, and good on them, I hope they continue to do it. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a very generous $300 super chat from Steve 2848. Yes, who says, Enforcer, I asked my wife as she was passing by, and she said the Ukrainian witch was sporting a 70mm stacked heel red velvet-clad pump, normally equipped with black trousers for maximum effectiveness. I learned so much watching your channel.
Well, I've got to say, Steve, I thank you once again so much for the massive amount of support. That's honestly unbelievable, the kind of support you come in and throw in here. Are you Mr. Beast? I'm really blown away every time you come in here. But I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that, I thank you so much for your wife providing that information to us. Of course, we know that civilian-made pumps are, of course, far better made than military-grade pumps. It's something. Of course, I don't have a lot of experience wearing pumps, but I do know people who do wear pumps, and they usually say that the civilian-grade ones are far better than the military ones. And so I thank you so much for the support, Steve. And that little aside there on those high heels, it's really interesting to me. And also thank you once again so much for the support. And if everyone in the chat could thank Steve is right now, as of like the past month, one of the primary ways that the stream continues to keep on running, because he throws in massive support, which helps us to, of course, keep the lights on and keep everything running behind the scenes. And so thank you so much once again, Steve, for the generous amount of support, because it helps us out to a degree you can't even imagine. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And folks, saying the live chat, Are mil-spec pumps better than civilian pumps? Let's start that debate again. I'm just joking, of course. Don't start that debate again. Just a joke. But anyways, moving on, we have a $10 super chat from BL Parak, who says, didn't Ukraine try to buy the Iron Dome, but Israel said no? Also, didn't the U.S. just buy a couple of Iron Domes from Israel?
I don't know about any, sadly, I hate to say this, I don't know about any information with the Ukrainians and the Iron Dome. The Israelis actually offered some at the start of the war, saying, we will send some over right away, and then we never heard about it again. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. And also, in terms of the United States buying any of them, I'm not really sure. So let's pull it up. United States Iron Dome. And it should pull up something. Choose U.S. Army prepares to choose homes for Iron Dome weapons. This was posted by DefenseNews.com. I do not know if they're a truthful organization or not. So let's see here. The U.S. Army has procured while service builds its indirect fire protection capability system, according to officials in charge of missile defense, modernization, and fielding. The Iron Dome system, blah, 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 was deployed to Guam last year from mid-October through November as part of Operation Iron Island. That's a pretty cool name, actually. The deployment was meant to test the system's capabilities, as well as train and refine the deployment capabilities of air defenders. So it looks like they actually have owned some. They've apparently owned 2, and they used them for testing and trialing, which is something that the United States has done a lot. And I really love to hear this kind of stuff because it's always good to have a domestic arms industry, and I believe that's important for any nation to have its own domestic, I guess you could say military industry. But it's always cool to know that the United States is innovating and looking at examples from around the world to see how they can improve or make things of their own. If y'all didn't know, just as an aside, because if y'all don't know me too well, I'm actually a big fan of trains. We can actually see the Acela Express right here, which is the only high-speed train here in the United States, right there. And this was actually heavily inspired by 2 high-speed trains. Well, not necessarily high-speed trains, but one was a high-speed train, one was not necessarily. It was more of like a tilting train. One was Swedish, the other one was German. Y'all may know the German one. It's the Ice 1 high-speed train right here, which I'll show y'all. That is the ice. We learned a lot from these, and we actually brought in stuff from all around the world for all kinds of development programs to see what we could reap from all of them, and then try and create something that implements something from every single one of them, the best of every world. And so I do think that that is pretty cool to hear, that the United States does own Iron Domes, and they're trying to learn about its technology and see about making something even better. So with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And real quick, Enforcer, I was just told by somebody in the live chat, I believe it was Kevin Keys from the live chat, told me that on Reuters, which is a decently reputable source, they said that the U.S. is readying a new $1 billion Ukraine weapons package and is expected to be announced by Monday. So, obviously, we haven't independently confirmed that, but I do see the story on Reuters. Enforcer, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, I would. I have heard about that as well. I did not include that in the news tonight. I'm waiting for the official announcement on Monday, which will then be reported on Tuesday, of course. But hopefully there will be another package passed, and hopefully we'll start to see the supplies flow at a faster rate. One thing that was considered in our Discord chat, which someone talked about, and it was a great point, is that the Ukrainians may not have the manpower to take on any more supplies, and so the United States is pretty much building up a tab for the Ukrainians to pull on whenever they do need new supplies, which I thought was a pretty an excellent point. So with that, I hope that does address that comment in a way, because I have heard about it, but I'm just still waiting for the official announcement on Monday. So with that, we are on to the next one. And also, real quick, I would like to address this. Olaf Nilsson, who has a very Scandinavian name. I'm assuming you must be Swedish, because the train you're talking about, the X2000, is correct. That was actually the train that was trialed here in the United States for a little while. And it's surprisingly enough, I believe a lot of people actually enjoyed both trains. I think the X2000 ended up winning in terms of its luxury. I'm not really sure if I remember the story correctly. It may have been the ICE high-speed train that did that, but I still think trains are really cool. I don't know about y'all, but I would love to see a day that high-speed rail at least existed on the eastern and western coasts, and maybe all the way down to Texas. I mean, like, here's the problem with high-speed rail with the way that Amtrak's always trying to implement it. And everyone, just please bear with me because we've now started the high-speed train whole thing, which I'm into. Let me show y'all a map of what Amtrak wants as a high-speed rail network, which is right here. This, I just don't think can be supported. Denver... I think Denver heading down to Albuquerque is reasonable, but literally creating a high-speed rail network that only has Omaha and Des Moines on it as somewhat larger towns does not seem reasonable. Also, attaching Las Vegas and Salt Lake City, it's the cost of running high-speed rail is expensive, and connecting towns like this that are so sparsely connected to each other does not seem reasonable. If I was in charge of the high-speed rail development in this country and actually looking at it as a point of not pleasing every constituent and trying to make an effective and efficient high-speed rail system that was actually taking the taxpayers, I guess you could say pockets in mind, I would cut out everything from Las Vegas to Des Moines, and just cut out that entire red line in between those two areas, and just make the area that goes from Cheyenne to Albuquerque, the gray line, an existence. The high-speed rail, I would imagine, the network at least, would kind of be in a bowl-shaped, considering the most densely populated areas of the country for this kind of rail travel. Also, due to how the United States has kind of developed over the past 60 years or so, with the suburban sprawl due to our car culture in a way, it's really difficult to make mass transportation like this high-speed rail a possibility, because once you get off the train, cities are so sparsely populated in terms of its density that it's really hard to get anywhere once you get off of that train, unless if there was some kind of a bus or some other kind of commuter rail service, which most likely would never exist, so it would have to be a bus. So on top of this large high-speed rail network, you would also have to add in a decent amount of bus services and more regular, I guess you could say, stops, or at least more regular trips on them, where instead of a bus coming around every 45 minutes, they came around every 15 minutes or so. But still, also I saw which is a new viewer, welcome. I saw you say that you were enjoying this channel, and welcome to the Lee Spring Army. You said you'd never been on a train, and I have not been on a lot of trains. I've been on an Amtrak train here in the United States that traveled from Birmingham to Atlanta. Gotta say, not that great of an experience, but I was on a couple of trains in the United Kingdom back before the Class 43 was retired. And also I was on the Class 800, which is the new train that the Great Western Rail Service uses in the United Kingdom. And I've got to say, rail travel in the United Kingdom is incredibly enjoyable. I really like it. It's expensive, though. It was really expensive, but it was a very enjoyable trip to take. And also, their rail infrastructure, along with their public transportation, is actually pretty decent. A lot of people give it a bad rap, but compared to the United States, it is golden. And I think there's a lot to be learned about this from foreign countries and how we can implement it here in the United States. If they can do it, we can do it. But with that, now to get off the high-speed rail aside, we are now on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Dreb222, who says, I have a feeling one thing or the other will happen if Russia is pushed back to their border. They will use tactical nuke by proxy or full mobilization. What do you say?
And I thank you very much for the support, but at that time, if the Russians were pushed all the way back to their border in all of Ukraine, I don't think they would use tactical nukes, because that would only bring the war into an international scale. And also, the other thing that would happen is that's kind of a losing side of things. And also, if they declared a general mobilization, if they got pushed back that bad where they didn't even have any land holdings in Ukraine whatsoever, a general mobilization wouldn't really do much to help them, because then they would only be exhausting the very small remnants of the military they have left in a pointless war that they'll never be able to win at that point. If the Russians got beat that badly, the smartest thing to do would be for them to sign a some kind of a peace treaty and just end the war, because it would never go in their favor at that point. And so with that, I hope that does address the question, at least in my opinion, and you may be right. They may use a tactical nuke. Putin is insane, after all, and that is something to be considered. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Jeanette McLean, who says, Been with you since day 8. Thanks for all the excellent reporting and put this towards ice cream in the hot weather. Man cannot live on pizza alone.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I will definitely put that towards some ice cream. In fact, we actually stocked up on ice cream a little bit ago. We got some of those Reese's flavored Klondike bars, which I actually think are really good. Matthew also thinks they're good too, because we like ate them in 2 days. But let's see, what else do we have? We have some yogurt pops. Surprisingly enough, the yogurt pops aren't that bad. That's something my mom gets because she wants to diet, and they're not bad at all. It's just that it's not really ice cream, and I really like ice cream a lot more. But yeah, we will make sure to put that.
Also, Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia is a pretty good addition as well. I'll have to admit.
Now, Matthew loves Ben and Jerry's. I think Ben and Jerry's is really good, but sadly, I'm just not a big fan of Cherry Garcia. I don't know what. Tell us what y'all think in the live chat. Team Cherry Garcia or team not really Cherry Garcia? Because Ben and Jerry's, I'm not making a strike against Ben and Jerry's. They have really good ice cream. It's just that for some reason, I just don't like cherries and chocolate mixing together. For some reason, it's just something that isn't good for my palate, I guess. I don't really know. But with that, I hope that kind of gets into a discussion a little bit about ice cream, and hopefully someone doesn't take that too far. Because one thing that always worries me is that we have a lot of reasonable people here in this live chat, but every once in a while, for some reason, things go off the rails and people will make violent conflicts over small things. Just remember, everyone, it's just a friendly discussion. Don't ever try and get in a fight over anything. At the end of the day, it won't even really matter. So with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to have an ice cream fund. Pizza and ice cream kind of sounds pretty nice. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I just saw it in the live chat. Somebody said Ben and Jerry's is a racist, horrible company. And I'll be totally honest, when I buy food, I don't get into the politics of the company. I just buy it. If the food tastes good, I buy it. That's as simple as it gets. Some people might look at that as being obtuse, but that's just the way I am. But next up, we have a $6 super chat from Martin Van Own, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for your support of the channel and supporting us all of the time. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Rhino PKC, who says, very simply, Taiwanese cheese videos.
We may make some Taiwanese cheese videos. I don't want to make everything cheese centralized. And actually, real quick, everyone, I have not looked at the analytics of that video in forever. I'm going to actually go look at that real quick to see how many people actually did watch that. Oh, it's dead, yeah. I was like, it's probably dead. It's gotten 21 views over the past 48 hours, so it's largely dead. But it got 37.5 thousand views, and compared to some of our last summary videos we uploaded, that was actually average for a video that we were having at that time. So honestly, it wasn't that bad. For an off-topic thing that wasn't on Ukraine, it actually did get a decent amount of viewer interaction compared to everything else we were getting. So we will be making more videos that are not on the Ukraine war. I would love to expand out into all kinds of topics like that. That's something that I'm always interested in, and I feel like a lot of y'all would be interested in it as well. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment. And also, yes, we will be probably trying to make a Taiwan cheese video sometime in the future. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Brian Rayburn, who says, USS Kearsarge, moored in Finland. Those amphibious vessels can move tons of equipment. The U.S. has 9.
The Kearsarge, oh, it's one of those amphibious landing ships. These things are pretty neat. And look at those giant sea stallions, I believe is what they're called, on the flight deck. These things are really cool. And it's also pretty impressive, the capabilities of the U.S. Navy. They are, you know, this is kind of a prerequisite whenever you talk about the military, specifically in the U.S. If it's the U.S. Navy, the Air Force, the Army, or the Marines, they're always far exceeding the capabilities of almost any other country's military and their combined efforts amongst all of their branches. So the capability of the U.S. Navy is always astounding. And I do have to say that these ships are incredibly interesting. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support and letting us know that that's currently in Finland. I did not actually know that right now. But that's actually really cool to know. And this picture was apparently taken a while ago because they still have Harriers on the flight deck, which are used by the U.S. Marine Corps. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, let me give a shout out to, let's see, let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, Greg Shiley once again. He puts in another $10 donation, but also without a comment. But thank you very much, Greg, for the support once more. And thank you very much for watching once again.
And before we move
up next, oh, yep.
Before we move on from that, I would like to thank you so much, Greg Shiley, for the support. Just to make a personal note on that. And also, before we move on to the next one, I would like to say this because I saw some people saying some stuff about Ben and Jerry's, and I don't really know about their political position. And this is just an opinion from me. You can agree or disagree with it. But one thing I wish companies would stop doing in the modern day is trying to make themselves get involved politically by funding certain organizations or groups. I don't care what groups or organizations they are. They can be on one side or the other. I just wish companies would stop doing that crap, because whenever they do, it makes you have to try and politically align with brands. And what is the point of that? You know, a business is there to make money. I don't know what morality and political stances have to do with turning a profit. And that's something that doesn't make any sense to me. On this channel and things like this is different because we are reporting on a war. And so it's important to always make sure to raise funds and support what we're talking about. But with a company that makes ice cream, or for example, a clothing store, why in the world do they have to align with political ideologies? It makes no sense. It's really stupid to me. And I can't stand how companies these days always sit there and talk about the quote-unquote mission statement like they have to have a higher goal than making money. You know, and I know that sounds shrewd. It may sound shrewd to some people, but when I walk into a store, I don't want to have to sit there and listen or have to see their preachings of their political ideologies. You're here to sell a product. That's all I care about. Is the product good or is it not? And that should be the only selling point. And that's something that a lot of companies do nowadays, is that they'll sell you a low-end subpar product, but sell it on the premise of our political values are this, and therefore you ought to buy the product because of that. It's a really stupid thing, and I wish companies would stop doing that crap, and I wish people would boycott any company that takes a political stance and funds anyone, anyhow, anywhere. I don't care what the stance is. That stuff ought to stop. But with that, then again, I'm making that pretty hardcore. That's just my opinion. And I'm open to always listening to other sides of the argument. Maybe there's a reason that someone would say that should happen. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Ash Scott, who says, when you can only advance by indiscriminately destroying cover, when winter comes, where do you keep warm and alive?
That's a great question, specifically for the Russians, because it always looks like they're under-equipped, and I think that they may be. Even in terms of winter gear. And so I don't know where they'll be hiding. We know that the Ukrainians are generally making some decent camps out there on the front lines. We've seen them before on video, and so I think they'll have a pretty decent time with heating and such things like that. But I'm not really sure with Russians. That may be a great consideration to have with a winter offensive by the Ukrainians as well, because they may not really be able to have that kind of ability, considering they don't use a lot of vehicles, which would be a great source for heating if the heaters work, which is always the thing that military vehicles have a huge problem with, is that the air conditioners may not work or the heaters may not work. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Also, I would like to say this real quick before we move on to the next one. I do see some people trying to make political statements with what I said there about companies, you know, making their political ideologies known. That goes in both directions. That's not meant to target, like, say, and I'm going to say this for a second so that way everyone understands the equal critique I'm giving. Like with Chick-fil-A and how they fund, I guess you could say, anti-homosexual groups. Why? And then with Disney, them doing the whole thing of the opposite. Why? They're there to sell products. Chick-fil-A is a chicken sandwich company. What in the world does that have to do with selling chicken sandwiches? And with Disney, you're there to sell a theme park experience or a movie. What in the world does that have to do with selling a theme park experience or a movie? That's literally looking at it from both equal sides. I don't understand it from either one. I'm there to buy your product. Is it good? Is it not? That's all I care about. I don't want to have to sit there and then get caught in a moral dilemma about the company's politics, because that just makes no sense. And it really hurts with marketing, because you're cutting out an entire base of people who may boycott you because of the political beliefs you just put out. And I don't want people to get into political argument, please. We're going to shut that down if people start getting in a political argument. We're not here about politics, but that's something that I find really annoying about companies in both regards, whether you go one direction or the other. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next one.
And real quick, I want to revisit that $10 super chat that Greg Shealy put in a moment ago. He actually just added a question to it. And he says, why is it that Ruski trolls always talk about 20% of Ukraine lost and 80% of GDP? Is this just nonsense?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
Yes, Greg said, why is it that Ruski trolls always talk about 20% of Ukraine lost and 80% of GDP? Is it just nonsense?
Yes, it is. I mean, yes, they have taken 20% of Ukraine, but that includes Crimea and the DPR and LPR, which they had before the war. And one thing that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me is that they say they're winning, yet they only control a fifth of the country, and it's 6 months into the war. That's not winning. You know, you can still control more than you started off with, but that's not winning by any means. So I don't know why they keep on bringing up that figure like it's a winning number. Because if you said to anyone, "Hey, have you completed your goals?" and they said, "Oh, I'm 20% of the way there," that is not considered succeeding by any means. So I hope that kind of addresses that part of their propaganda statement. And the other one is that I don't think there is certainly not enough economic activity in these areas of the country, maybe in Mariupol and Berdyansk and maybe Kherson, but definitely not in any other part of the country here in north, because there's nothing there that could account for 80% of Ukraine's GDP. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as we're able to get it. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the question.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Yuri Bench, who says, I am ashamed that Israel did not send the Iron Dome system to Ukraine.
I am also kind of ashamed by that, because they did definitely say that they would do that, and I wish they would. I don't know why. I mean, it seems like there is a little bit of a sizable Russian population in Israel, and that may be part of the political motivators behind the scenes as to why they're not doing that. But I wish they would at least allow Ukraine to purchase them and not just give them outright as something of a donation. And so with that, I hope that I have addressed the comment fairly well. And I thank you very much for the support. And I do agree that Ukraine should get some kind of missile defense system, regardless whether it's a Patriot, more NASAMS, or Iron Domes for that matter. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Junebug, as well as a $2 super chat from Dupper Bob. So thank you very much to both of you for your support. And we also have a $2 super chat from Zach Jeffers, who says, I'm back after a little break from the streams.
And welcome back, Zach, and it's good to see that the commander of the Discord Guard is back and kicking. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Zach, and thank you to everyone who's helped this channel to keep on running through y'all's support. We don't run any ads, you know, so this is literally the only way we're able to keep the thing running. And so I thank y'all all so much for helping us to keep this going. And that's one thing that I find funny with folks who come on here and say, oh, he's greedy. It's like, if I was greedy, I would be running ads on top of this, and I don't, because I find them annoying, and I'd rather take that as a loss than annoy people to the end of time. So with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again, everyone, for y'all's support.
All right, and next up, we have a $2 super chat from CA Lags, who says, only plus for North Korea is their nukes likely work.
I think that may be their only plus, and we don't even know how many they have, and we don't even know if they really work. But with that, I do thank you for the... Was that a super chat?
It was.
I was just making sure, because I thought for some reason we had just entered the live chat. But I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And the North Koreans are not a force to be reckoned with. Look how many major roadways they have, and look at a map of North Korea at night, and tell me that's really a serious country to contend with. And with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Keyboard Warrior, who says, it would be nice if you would make a short segment on North Korean history of sending slave labor to Russia. Vice News made great reporting on it. Thanks for your work, and yee-haw. And real quick, I'm going to say about that, I actually saw that Vice News documentary. It was a multi-series video thing, I do believe, but very insightful, and I had no idea that North Koreans worked in Russia like that, in very sort of secretive camps.
And also,
but I'm going to let the enforcer take it from here.
And also, I would have to say, Keyboard Warrior, that was an incredibly good documentary that Vice News made. I also have to say this: Vice News, at least, and let me make sure to say preface the statement with this: Vice News back in the day is kind of what, and don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to become Vice News, but Vice News and their neutral reporting that they used to have back in the earlier 2000s, back when the Crimean crisis began, and they were reporting that, they were doing an incredible job. And I thought, and they were very neutral, and I liked their coverage because they didn't try and make it clear what affiliation they had. They were just there to report the story, and I think that's a great way to report news. Sadly, they had a bit of a decline, and they, of course, took a hardcore political slant. One thing that really struck me the wrong way was when they attacked reenactors as racists, which was just almost defamatory against the reenacting like hobby. I didn't really like that much. But still, anyways, moving on from that, I do have to say that that was an incredible documentary, and I would have to say that would be an interesting video to make and cover. I don't know if we'd be able to get a lot of video footage of that because not a lot is taken, but it is still incredibly interesting to cover how the Russians pretty much import North Korean pretty much forced labor into the middle of Siberia. And with that, I hope that answers the comment, and thank you so much for the support, Keyboard Warrior, because I see you in the chat every once in a while, and it is great to know that you're supporting this channel and helping us to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Paul Mint, who says, "Great work, gentlemen, and thank you for your efforts."
And thank you so much, Paul, for enjoying this channel, and I thank you so much for supporting us, and we're going to keep up these good efforts as best we can. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one, and thank you so much for your support.
And for our final super chat of the night, we have a $1 donation from Paddington, who says, "We play anthems and hockey games. Thank you for respecting."
And thank you so much for the support. I don't know exactly what that means. I haven't really watched a hockey game before, but I do thank you so much for the support. And if you're talking about the anthem we played at the start of the stream, I think that's the best rendition of the Ukrainian anthem ever. And so that will probably never go away. We're probably never going to change the intro. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And moving on to our live chat questions. Up first, we have one from MJ, who says, "We haven't been hearing or seeing any Bayraktar news in a while. Is there any particular reason?"
I'm not really sure. I think that the Bayraktars, as far as we were told, have become a state secret, but at the same time, maybe all of them have been shot down, or there's really no way to use them anymore. There's a lot of reasons why we may not be getting any news, but we have noticed that as well, is that there's not a lot of video evidence or footage coming out from Bayraktars anymore. Maybe it may be that their doctrine, along with the loss of Bayraktars, has led them to change their tactics with how they use drones, and they saw that it was far more effective and cost efficient to use a DJI Maverick or some kind of an R-18 to drop bombs onto Russian vehicles instead of using a Bayraktar to do that same job. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. I know that we don't have any hardcore explanation as to why that's happening, but we have noted it as well, and there's a lot of reasons as to why that could have happened. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
And next up, we have another super chat. This time it's from Chris, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "I heard the Iron Dome wouldn't be effective because it was designed to shoot down crude, short-range missiles, supposedly not what Russia is using."
That may be true. The Iron Dome is usually used to shoot down MLRSs, but still, there can be an argument made for those to be used in an area like Kharkiv, which is always being hit by MLRS barrages. If they had an Iron Dome system in Kharkiv, a lot of the artillery barrages and attacks on the city could be completely avoided. And in fact, I don't know if the Iron Dome can shoot down ballistic or cruise missiles, and due to time, we won't be able to pull that up right now. But even if it isn't, maybe they could also get Patriot missile defense systems from the United States that could shoot down those kinds of missiles. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, because while it's true that it may not be able to shoot down all of the missiles and rockets that the Russians use, it would be able to shoot down a decent amount of them. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Greg Shealy, once more, who says, "Are you afraid, foe, or for your life? Have you been threatened?"
Yes, we have been threatened multiple times. Not really afraid for my life, just in case if anyone was wondering, are always we are always packing. So if I'm in my car, there's a gun there. If I'm at my desk, there's a gun here. Because of the threats, I made sure to have a gun everywhere because the only bodyguard I have is me. And so if anyone's going to try and do something to me, and considering I'm always at this house because I'm always working, if they ever come up to me, they're going to have bad intentions, and I'm the only one at that moment who will be able to keep myself alive. And so I had to make sure to find a way to do it. So not really concerned, but it always is something whenever they do come through. It used to happen a lot more earlier on, and it's kind of been dissipating off over the past few weeks. We haven't gotten a lot of them recently, but yeah, it's been a little bit of a problem. So with that, I hope that does answer your question, Greg Shiley, but do not fret. We're going to keep covering the news. We don't let anyone intimidate us, and if they want to try, I'll be more than happy to let them, because they'll never succeed. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again so much for the support.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Grandpa Jay for putting in a $4 super chat without a comment. So thank you very much for your support. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Shannon Devine, who says, "What do you think Putin's worst day has been?"
I think Putin's worst day, at least from the situation of damage control, would have been when the Moskva was sunk. They tried to cover that up as best as possible, but that was the single largest Russian loss in this war, was the Moskva. So I think in terms of Putin's worst day, at least during this war, that day would have been it. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Jax, who says, "Will you do channel memberships?"
Sadly, no. We did look into doing that. I think this is just me, and since I do run the channel, I guess this opinion just kind of flies. I find the channel memberships, specifically with what we do with the news and war coverage, to be very tacky. I think it comes off as, I just think it comes off as tacky. It doesn't really look good, and I'd rather just have people support us through super chats instead of memberships. Because I've seen it on other channels, and I'm just not a big fan of it. It's just, I don't know, it just doesn't come off well to me. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from DL, who says, "Israel under attack now, maybe not sending dome."
Well, I don't think so, because they wouldn't be sending the Iron Domes they currently have installed. They would be building, they would be sending ones that they have in storage or would make. So it wouldn't make sense if they were having to pull out of their current Iron Dome inventory to send them, but they would definitely not be doing that, as they pretty much mandate a certain amount of, Iron Dome systems around their country. And so with that, I hope that does address the question, at least as far as I'm understanding it with the Iron Domes. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have another question, this time back to the live chat. This time we have one from Gerald DeGraff, who says, "I'm thinking about how to sustain the Ukrainian effort and further show solidarity. Should Western governments pledge monthly financial support until hostilities end? Moral hazard, ?
We could. There's nothing ever stopping us from doing anything, and that's kind of an argument that I make on a lot of stuff, is that people say it's a concern that the Chinese are buying up land here in the United States. But if the United States ever saw that that was to our detriment, the government could just declare that we're seizing that land from the Chinese, and it'll become federal property. That's something we could do. And so there's nothing stopping the U.S. government, I don't know about foreign governments, from saying we're going to be giving pretty much a monthly stipend to the Ukrainians to continue on this war, and it can be a tab that they use in any direction they want. They get requested in straight up cash or in military aid. We could do something like that. There of course would be a gripe about that what if the war turns into nothing? We're paying them for nothing. That's always a gripe that someone could throw out. But at the same time, that would simplify a lot of the process of having to approve funds and budgets and things like that. But at the same time, I think due to the bureaucratic system of the U.S. government, you would always have to come around every single time that this monthly stipend would have to be paid and have to make sure it's approved by Congress. or it would have to be given in a lump sum, and I think that's why they haven't done that yet. But once again, I'll have to look into how Congress works with the budget and see if that is something that they have to do or not. But I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I'm able to, I guess you could say, understand. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another live chat question, this time from Sweet70433, who says, any information about the invisible cities in Russia, Ukraine, and some stands, most related to nuclear, rare metal mining, or biological activities, third worst nuke disaster and pollution?
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about perfect city of Chelyabinsk. Chelyabinsk. Yes. Secret city. Secret city is so secret we see it on Google Earth. Oh. Anyways, Chelyabinsk is a secret city. Well, specifically Chelyabinsk 40, if we can find it. Let's see. This is near Kazakhstan. That's where a lot of them are. Let's find Baikonur. The Baikonur, I feel like would be a lot easier to find. By the way, Baikonur's in Kazakhstan, but they still have a secret city there. Oh, man. Come on. Am I going to have to type it in? Baikonur. Also, interesting fact, if y'all didn't know, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, not to be a geek or anything, I used to watch a lot of Star Trek, but they actually called the Deep Space Nine space station when it was retaken by the Cardassians, which sounds a lot like Kardashian. They renamed the station to Baikonur, which was a direct reference to the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is right outside of the secret city of Baikonur. But anyways, here's the Cosmodrome. You can see it here, I believe. Nope, I don't think that's actually the Cosmodrome. Nope, I think this is an industrial area. Where in the world is the Cosmodrome? I know they don't hide this on Google Images. Do they? No, there's no way they do, right? Oh, I think they do. I can't tell you for certain. But anyways, there are a lot of closed cities. A lot of them in Russia. I don't think the Ukrainians still practice the idea of closed cities because Enerhodar, as far as I know, you can just drive into Enerhodar. But then again, I'm not entirely sure. But still, closed cities are kind of an interesting political phenomenon that popped up in the Soviet Union because they were trying to keep state secrets incredibly secret, and so they just ended up literally closing off the cities to everyone that wasn't allowed in there. And if you lived there, you had to keep it a secret. Or you weren't really allowed out of the city unless you had some kind of travel paper to say that you could. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses the comment in a way. I'm sorry that it's not really that good of an answer because I myself don't really know a lot about the closed cities or how they really work. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Will Riley, who says, sorry I am late. Dick Cheney says, hi. What do you call an amputee doing karate? Partial arts. Oh my goodness.
Well,
Oh my
why?
goodness.
Someone's getting a little bit of edge here in the chat. Well, I thank you very much for the support, Will Riley. And I gotta say, that's that I'm a huge fan of that. Well, I don't want to say that because then I'll be encouraging it, but it's pretty funny. I like that joke. But it's still that's still pretty actually pretty good one though, I gotta say. So thank you very much, Will Riley. It's fine if you're late. Of course, there's always the replay button, and that helps us out a lot when people replay streams. But I thank you so much for the support, Will Riley, and you came in with a bang tonight. And I'll have to make sure to remember partial arts. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you for the crazy joke. And with that, on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Beam, who says, are weapons sent undercover? Thanks for your work, enforcers.
And I thank you so much for the support, and it depends on what country you're talking about, because for some, it will be sent secretly. Like, we didn't know that the Norwegians had sent M109s to Ukraine until we saw video evidence of them being used on the front. And so some equipment is sent secretly, but with the United States, I think that we're largely telegraphing and broadcasting what we're sending over almost every single time. But it does depend on what countries have what kind of laws about what they disclose to the public and what they don't. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from NOYDB, who says that the Cosmodrome is where Bald and Bankrupt got arrested with his girlfriend. The video came out the other day. And NOYDB, I will say that they actually made that out, or at least the news did, to be quite serious when it happened. But after watching Bald's video, it actually wasn't that bad, really.
I would have to agree. That's something that's really true. And also, I watched that video, and I have to say, Bald and Bankrupt is a pretty interesting person in what he does and where he goes. And he's also been one of the people who's been out of the front, like kind of covering some of the most dangerous places to go. Of course, that's kind of his shtick as a YouTube channel. Everyone has their shtick, and so it's pretty cool to see what his is, because it's certainly an interesting one. But with that, I hope that does address the comment in a YBD, because yes, when he was arrested, he was actually taken down the road from Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is actually up here. It's just north of the city. I didn't see it for some reason. And they took him right down to Baikonur, the closed city, which is really cool, actually. And it looks like there was actually some like drop-down camera views, street view stuff that we could get in Baikonur. So let's take a look at that again real quick. Looks like a lot of it's in like the parks and stuff, but we'll try and get to this one. What does this town look like? Ah, yes. Good old Soviet town with Soviet architecture. Look, it's the Soviet Gostinitsa. And it's also the hotel. Let's go in and take a look. I love Baikonur.
I don't.
I don't. Honestly, it looks like the place is run down. In fact, this whole entire wall is leaning inwards. So I don't think that's good for the building structurally. And also, look, they got the 9th of May stuff there. Anyways, I do thank you for the support. That is true, and it is interesting to take a look at Baikonur. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have yet another super chat, this time from Shannon Devine, who put in a $10 donation once more and says, I figured Putin's worst moment would have been McDonald's leaving. What's Putin's second worst moment in the war?
I would say that Putin's second worst moment in the war was when... I'm trying to think about that right now. Second worst moment in the war would have been... It would have been the time that the Russian front in the north completely collapsed and they just had to withdraw from it in the Kyiv and Sumy and Chernihiv area. I would say that would be about the second worst. Actually, I would say that would be the first worst point in the war, and the second worst point in the war would be the sinking of the Moskva. Those are like the two key moments that I would say were terrible moments for the Russians that were really hard for them to try and disguise and cover up in a way. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving back to the live chat questions, up next we have a question from Wildcat, who says, do you think the U.S. would help protect Taiwan?
I think we would at least send military support. I don't know if we would get directly involved in supporting them, considering that the Chinese would be fighting them. And while the United States is the toughest dude on the block right now, we still don't really like to get involved in wars, and usually there's not a lot of support for them in the United States unless we're directly attacked. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way, and I do think that it would be crucially important to help support Taiwan in any way we find necessary because they're important to the world economy. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And back to our super chats, we have one more, this time from William Devereux, who puts in a $5 donation and says, what's the stickiest bird? Velcro. Oh my goodness. Thanks for the streams, enforcers and watcher. Stay well and will inform everyone. Much love.
And I thank you so much, William, for the support. And we will make sure to keep everyone as informed as best as possible. And I would have to say that the stickiest bird out there is the Velcro. That was actually a pretty smart joke, a pretty good dad joke, and I'm a huge appreciator of those because I think that they are the peak of comedy. Oh, you know, there's an equal room for all kinds of jokes, but they are definitely in their own field, and I do enjoy them a lot. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment, and thank you once again, William, for the support. And so with that, we are going to answer about 3 to 5 more comments from the live chat, and then we'll be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, back to the live chat, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, if Belarus was to launch a limited missile-only attack on military targets in Lithuania, would Poland immediately attack Belarus under Article 5, or would Poland wait and see?
I think that Poland would most likely wait for the rest of NATO to get behind them and then attack. They would not attack on their own, but that would definitely escalate pretty much into war itself if something was to land inside of Belarus and explode. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And there are, of course, exceptions to everything, but I think that would be the by and large running principle behind it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Herp Derp NV, who says, did you guys see that Russia crashed an ICBM transport truck into a civilian car?
I did not see that, but I would not doubt it. If you're talking about the Topol M, I believe is what it's called, Topol M. Oh yeah, I got it right. If you're talking about the Topol M, I wouldn't doubt it. This thing looks like a beast to drive, and I bet you it's a nightmare. But yes, I think the Russians have about 16 of those with live ICBMs in them. And the reason why they use these is because, unlike a silo, these things can move anywhere over mainland Russia, and so they're a lot more difficult to track. So with that, once again, I hope that does answer the comment, at least in a way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Sweaty Chungus, who says, Enforcer, how much is an Iron Dome system, and how much is one munition for it? Also, do they make one that attaches to a ring camera?
That's a very good question. Iron Dome cost.
Ah, that Bitcoin bot's back again.
Hey, if y'all invested in crypto makes a lot of money. Anyways, the units cost $50 million per battery. Actually, a pretty decent price. That's about the price of 3 Tunguskas. And then we can see that it costs about $100,000 to $150,000 per missile. So actually fairly decent prices all around the board. I would say that's not bad at all. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat, this time from Rob ICX Man, who puts in a $20 donation and says, the Russians taking the nuclear power plant concerns me greatly. Should another Chernobyl occur, the Ukrainians will pay the tab, not the Russians, except from the international community. Thoughts?
That is true. The Russians have controlled the Enerhodar power plant for months, and if the Enerhodar power plant does get critically damaged and explode, that radioactive fallout will fall on Ukrainian soil. Even if the war does end and Ukraine retakes it, it's going to be something that they have to deal with. Considering that they've already dealt with the Chernobyl incident, which, fortunately for them, most of the radioactive particles landed in Belarus, actually, so they didn't really have to deal with it much. The Belarusians really ended up getting the short end of the stick there. I would have to say that would be something that would certainly be bad. The international community, if we'd like to call it that, would definitely step up and try and support Ukraine as much as they can and give any support necessary to try and quell this nuclear disaster. But I would have to say that I would agree that the Ukrainians would pay the tab if there was a nuclear disaster like that. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, Rob. That's a great one, actually. And I think that's something we haven't covered much recently. And so with that, we are on to about 2 or 3 more live questions from the chat, and then we'll be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Rob.
All right. And next up, we have a question from Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, question, what is the authority that will prosecute war crimes occurring in Russia's invasion of Ukraine? And actually, I believe it would be the International Criminal Court at The Hague.
It would be, and that's only if they somehow get the ability to get these Russians, arrest them, and then hold them on trial. That's something that would pretty much require the Russians to sign an unconditional surrender to do. So sadly, in actual practice, it most likely will not happen. But in the technical aspect of things, of if it actually did happen, who would take care of that? Matthew is correct. It would most likely be the International Crimes Court of The Hague. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you very much for an interesting question.
And next up, we have another super chat. This time from Will Riley once again, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Speaking of Tunguska, what do you believe happened in the early 1900s there? I am speaking of the Tunguska event."
Great question. Let's actually pull that up. The Tunguska crater. It's not a crater. It's actually just a large area devoid of trees where this meteorite exploded above the ground. Let's see if we can actually get some Google Maps. I want to show this on the map. Tunguska event. Google My Maps. Oh, come on. I don't want Google My Maps. I want Google Maps. Come on. Anyways, we'll just discuss what happened since it'll be too difficult to find it on Google Maps. So a meteorite came flying in from space. It was an incredibly large one. Came flying down into the middle of Siberia somewhere. I forgot exactly where. And then it exploded above the ground, which is kind of an odd occurrence. Usually meteorites explode on impact. You know, that makes a lot more sense. Somehow this one exploded above the ground, and it caused millions of trees to be felled. They literally just got ripped out of the ground and flipped over. And that's pretty much all that happened. I mean, like, it's kind of a straightforward affair. Fortunately, it exploded in a place where no one was in Siberia. There was very few people out there. But it was a crazy event. It was a nutty phenomenon. And I think one of the largest meteorites to hit in recorded history. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, Will Riley. And I thank you so much once again for the support. One second. I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel keep on running. I hope that does address what I think happened. I think it was just a meteorite strike. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And we're now going to answer 2 more live chat questions and then round out tonight's stream.
And our second to last live chat question goes to Muley Man, who says, "Have you seen that new weapon being used by Ukraine? It's a drone, and it seems to fire some kind of anti-tank weapon at vehicles."
Unfortunately, I have not seen that. If you could provide us with a name for that sometime around, I would love to see it, but unfortunately I'm going to have to declare ignorance on it because I haven't heard anything about it either way. And so with that, we are on to the next one, the final question of the night. And so, of course, I have to say this because I say it every night. Who is the lucky last person who threw in that lucky last question of the night?
And that lucky last viewer that threw in that lucky last question of the night is Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, "Does Russia have any U.S. military equipment in their inventory that they might use in the Ukraine invasion?"
Can you reread that again?
They said, "Does Russia have any U.S. military equipment in their inventory that they might use in the Ukraine invasion?"
Russian military equipment. I would say no, because they haven't bought any from the United States, but let me look through the list, at least publicly accessible on Wikipedia, to see. Golly, look at all the camo patterns they have. They have bar mitzvah. Isn't that like that sounds a lot like a Jewish holiday, bar mitzvah.
Oh yeah, or that party they have at their, I think, 16th birthday or something like that.
Yes, that's what it is. It's the 16th birthday. And then we have a camouflage called the Cowboy. You know, they got some really stupid names for the camouflage. Anyways, moving on. Let's see here. They have an OSA, non-lethal weapon. I don't know about y'all, but that just looks like a short-barreled shotgun to me that you can put 12 gauges in. Let's see. We're going to scroll on. We're looking for anything remotely American. I feel like we're not going to find anything, but I have to check because this is the last question of the night. A cord assault rifle. Interesting. Of course, they have a lot. Everyone's always a big fan of the Val. Ooh, it's a Val. I mean, like, I think they're neat, but eh. Let's see. Moving on. Looks like they modernized the PTRD. Moving on. Scrolling on down. Another cord. They have another weapon called a cord. Scrolling on down. Scrolling on down. Scrolling on down. Scrolling. Haven't seen anything American made yet. Scrolling on down. Scrolling on down. Jeez, they got a lot of equipment. I bet that's a pain in the ass to supply logistically. They got some Italian cars. They got these Iveco LMVs. Interesting. Scrolling on down. Apparently they got some Chinese cars. Interesting. How many do they have of those? Oh, they don't know. Scrolling on down. Scrolling on down. I don't see anything American yet. We saw Italian. No American. I think everything was made in Russia or the Soviet Union. What is this? That's like the killdozer that that guy used in that town. Scrolling on down. Scrolling on down. They got a lot of drones. And it looks like future vehicles. I'm glad that they put all of this stuff under future vehicles because everyone knows that these things aren't usable. Scrolling on down. Yeah, they don't have anything made by America, at least that we know of, that could be used in this war. And so, I hope that answers your question. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all once again so much for watching. And if you did enjoy this channel and you are new here, please make sure to subscribe because we run these streams every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, where we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Of course, it has been an absolute pleasure to report the news to all of y'all, and I hope that during this question segment, I was able to at least give a decent answer to everyone that considered the facts and made a pretty logical assumption if it had to make one. And so with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover day 164 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And with that, I hope you all have a great night, stay safe, and take care.